Don't go home tonight, Arthur. They're preparing the furnace. Those 12 words, whispered by a stranger I'd barely known, saved my life. My son, Leo, and his wife, Brenda, they saw me as nothing more than a senile old man, a burden they could easily dispose of to cash in my life insurance. But they forgot that before I was just an old man, I was Arthur Finch, a builder. I laid every brick, framed every wall, poured every ounce of concrete that formed 17 Briarwood Lane. I knew every secret, every creak, every hidden nook of that house, intimately, like the back of my own calloused hand. And tonight, instead of sleeping soundly in my own bed, in the attic room they'd relegated me to, I was watching, helpless and horrified, from the grim comfort of a roadside Motel 6, as my own flesh and blood tried to burn me alive. Before I tell you how I managed to turn the tables on them, how a forgotten builder found his last blueprint for justice, let's just say this. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about the quiet understanding of a stranger, the one who sees you when no one else does. If you believe that, hit that like button and subscribe. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. My name is Arthur Finch. I'm 71 years old, and until about 6 months ago, I truly believed I had a family. It was a Tuesday in mid-November, the kind of raw Pennsylvania evening where the rain didn't just fall. It felt like 1,000 tiny ice shards running down your neck, seeping into your collar, chilling you to the bone. I had just finished my shift as a part-time security guard at the public library in Willow Creek. It wasn't a job I needed for the money, not with a fully paid-off house and a decent retirement nest egg, but it was a job I'd taken specifically to stay out of my own house, to escape the stifling atmosphere that had become my daily reality. As I walked towards my old Ford F-150, its chrome dull with age and neglect, I saw him, Sam. He was the homeless man who sat on the worn wooden bench near the library's entrance, wrapped in a threadbare army coat, a perpetual fixture, come rain or shine. Every day, for the past year, I'd bought him a large black coffee from the diner down the street, and I'd slip him a crisp $10 bill. It was my small ritual, a quiet act of penance, perhaps, or simply because my late wife, Eleanor, would have insisted on it. Eleanor, with her boundless compassion, would never have walked past someone in need. I bent down, the stiffness in my old knees protesting, to hand him the steaming cup. "Here you go, Sam. Stay warm," I murmured, the words automatic, part of our unspoken exchange. Usually, he'd just nod, a silent acknowledgement, or mumble a barely audible thank you. But today was different. Today, his hand shot out like a viper, fast and unexpected, grabbing my wrist with a grip that shocked me. It wasn't the weak, tremulous hold of an old man worn down by the streets. No, this was a grip of iron, surprisingly strong, almost bruising. His eyes, usually clouded with fatigue or distant thought, were suddenly sharp, piercing blue, and filled with an unsettling terror. He pulled me closer, ignoring the hot coffee sloshing over the brim of the cup, spilling onto the wet pavement and staining his worn coat. "Arthur," he rasped, his voice rough as gravel, yet startlingly clear. "Listen to me. Do not go back to 17 Briarwood Lane tonight. Do not go home." I tried to pull away, confused, startled, a spark of irritation mixed with a burgeoning sense of unease. "Let go of me, Sam. How do you know my address?" He tightened his grip, his gaze darting around the near-empty parking lot as if he expected a sniper to emerge from the shadows. "You've been kind to me," he hissed, the urgency in his voice palpable. "So I'm warning you. Go to a hotel. Sleep in your truck. Go anywhere but there. They are preparing the furnace. Tonight is the night." Then, just as abruptly as he had seized me, he released my wrist and slumped back against the bench, pulling his hood over his face, melting back into the landscape as if our intense exchange had never happened. I stood there for a moment, the cold rain soaking through my jacket, dripping from my hair, but I barely felt it. My mind was reeling. I wanted to ask him more, to demand an explanation, but he had shut down completely, his body language communicating an impenetrable barrier. I stumbled into my Ford F-150, the rain-slick door closing with a thud that echoed the frantic hammering of my heart against my ribs, like a bird trapped in a cage. I immediately locked the doors, the metallic click sounding impossibly loud in the suddenly silent cab. "They are preparing the furnace." Sam's words echoed, reverberating in the confined space, chilling me to the bone. I started the engine, my hands shaking so violently on the steering wheel that the truck vibrated with their tremor. 17 Briarwood Lane. That wasn't just an address to me. That was the house I had built with my own two hands, brick by painstaking brick, 45 years ago. I was a general contractor back then, a proud craftsman. I laid every foundation stone, framed every wall, nailed every shingle. It was where Eleanor and I had brought our son, Leo, home from the hospital. It was where we had raised him, laughed, celebrated, and mourned. It was supposed to be my sanctuary, my refuge, my golden years, my retirement dream. But ever since Eleanor passed away from a sudden stroke 6 months ago, that dream had curdled, slowly but surely, into a living nightmare, into my own personal prison. At the funeral, Leo and his wife Brenda had cried crocodile tears, their grief appearing genuine, almost theatrical. "Dad, you can't live alone in that big house," Leo had said, his hand heavy on my shoulder, a gesture that felt less like comfort and more like a claim. "We'll move in. We'll take care of you. You won't have to lift a finger." It sounded like love. It sounded like filial devotion. It was, in grim reality, an invasion. Within a week, Brenda had systematically moved my belongings out of the master bedroom, the room Eleanor and I had shared for decades, the room that still held the faint scent of her favorite lavender sachet. "We need the space, Arthur," she'd said, not even bothering to call me Dad anymore, her tone dismissive, as if I were a piece of furniture to be rearranged. "You'll be more comfortable in the attic room. It's much quieter up there, and you'll have your privacy." They took over the master suite, painting the walls a garish shade of teal that Eleanor would have detested. They took over the kitchen, replacing Eleanor's beloved, slightly chipped ceramic mugs with sleek, impersonal glass. I watched, helpless, as Brenda ruthlessly threw out Eleanor's favorite floral curtains, dismissing them as cheap and outdated. I watched as Leo parked his brand-new, gleaming sports car in my garage, a vehicle he'd bought with money he'd borrowed from me for what he called a promising investment opportunity. Money I knew, with a sinking feeling, I would never see again. I, a retired contractor with $500,000 in savings and a fully paid-off house, was suddenly a mere guest in my own home, relegated to the attic, my life reduced to the parameters they set. I took the part-time security job at the library just to escape Brenda's cold stares, her thinly veiled contempt, and Leo's constant, desperate requests for more money to cover his increasingly bad investments. The house, once a source of pride and comfort, had become a battleground, and I, its builder, was the enemy within. I was halfway home, the windshield wipers slapping a frantic rhythm back and forth against the relentless rain, when the cold, hard logic finally kicked in. Sam was just a homeless man, after all. He was probably off his medication, or confusing me with someone else, lost in the labyrinth of his own mind. How could a man who lived on a bench in front of the public library possibly know what was happening inside the walls of my home? I told myself I was being a fool, a paranoid old man succumbing to the ramblings of a stranger. I should just go home, heat up some soup, and forget the whole unsettling encounter. I turned onto Elm Street, just 5 minutes from my driveway, the thought of warmth and normalcy almost convincing me. Then it hit me, like a physical blow to the gut. The furnace, my stomach dropped, a cold dread spreading through my veins, colder than the Pennsylvania night. My house, like most modern homes, had a highly efficient HVAC system for heating and cooling. But in the farthest corner of the basement, almost forgotten, was an old industrial gas furnace from the 1952. A relic. I hadn't turned it on in over 10 years. Eleanor used to complain that it smelled like rotten eggs whenever it kicked on, a sulfurous stench that permeated the entire house. I knew exactly why. The pilot light assembly was faulty, prone to blowing out, and the main ventilation pipe had a hairline crack, barely visible, but enough to vent noxious fumes. Years ago, I had personally capped the gas line to that old unit, sealing it off to make it safe, to ensure no one accidentally breathed in deadly carbon monoxide. I'd never removed the furnace itself because it was a hulking, cast-iron beast, too heavy and cumbersome to haul out of the narrow basement stairs. But Leo didn't know about the cap. He didn't know about the crack in the ventilation. He only knew it was an old furnace, connected to the main gas line. He would assume it was functional, just unused. If someone uncapped that line and tried to light it without repairing the vent, it wouldn't just heat the house. It would fill the rooms, slowly, silently, with lethal carbon monoxide. Or, even worse, if they tampered with the pressure valve, if they created a spark with a leak, it would turn my carefully built home into a bomb. A devastating explosion that would level the entire property. And my room, the attic room, where they had so thoughtfully moved me. The primary ventilation shaft from that old, dangerous furnace ran directly up the chimney chase. A direct conduit right behind my bed. If that thing leaked, if it exploded, I would be the first to die. I wouldn't even wake up. I would simply drift off into a permanent, silent sleep, a victim of their calculated cruelty. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Colder, far colder, than the freezing rain outside. Sam wasn't crazy. He knew. He had seen something, heard something. He wasn't just rambling. He was warning me. I slammed on the brakes, the sudden screech of tires on the wet pavement causing the car behind me to blare its horn aggressively, its lights flashing. I didn't care. I spun the steering wheel, executing a clumsy but decisive U-turn right there in the middle of Elm Street, my heart now a frantic drumbeat in my chest. I was not going to 17 Briarwood Lane. Not tonight. Not ever again, as long as Leo and Brenda were inside it. I drove for 5 miles, pushing the old F-150 faster than I should, until I reached the familiar blue and red sign of a Motel 6 just off the interstate. It was a dump, a transient haven of cheap carpets and thinner walls, but it was safe. I paid cash for a room on the ground floor, a nameless, faceless transaction designed for anonymity. As I sat on the lumpy mattress, staring at the peeling wallpaper that depicted a faded, abstract landscape, I felt a terrible, icy rage beginning to build inside me. My son, my own son, was he truly capable of this? Was Brenda, the woman who smiled at me over dinner, truly capable of this? I pulled out my phone, its screen cracked in the corner from a fall at a job site years ago. Years ago, almost as an afterthought, I had installed a hidden security camera in the garage. Not for grand conspiracies, but to catch package thieves who had been pilfering tools from neighbors' porches. I had never told Leo or Brenda it existed. They thought the old, bulky camera above the garage door was broken, a relic from a bygone era. But I had cleverly replaced its internals with a high-definition lens, connected discreetly to the Wi-Fi. It was my secret eye. My hands trembled violently as I opened the app, my thumbs feeling clumsy and alien on the familiar interface. The screen flickered, then resolved into a grainy, greenish tint of night vision. The live feed from my garage. At first, it looked peaceful. My workbench, usually cluttered with the intricate birdhouses I'd started building to pass the endless hours, was still and serene. My old table saw, covered in a tarp like a sleeping beast, sat in the corner. The concrete floor, stained with years of oil from my truck repairs, was a testament to honest labor. A space of creation, then movement. My breath hitched in my throat, a dry, ragged gasp. The side door of the garage, the one that led from the mudroom, opened slowly. A figure stepped into the frame. It was Leo. Even in the low-quality, infrared video, I knew his walk. It was the same hesitant shuffle he'd had as a teenager, trying to sneak in past curfew, hoping no one would hear him. But he wasn't a teenager anymore. He was a 8-year-old man, wearing expensive sweatpants and a hoodie I'd bought him for his last birthday. He looked pale, his face washed out by the green glow of the camera, his movements agitated. He was pacing back and forth, running his hands through his thinning hair, looking like a trapped animal, a desperate man caught in a snare of his own making. And then I saw what he was holding. In his right hand, heavy and swinging by his side, was the red plastic gas canister, the one I kept for the lawnmower, the one I had filled just last week. I brought the phone closer to my face, squinting, praying that my eyes were deceiving me, that I was seeing it wrong. Maybe he was just getting gas for his car. Maybe he was going to mow the lawn at midnight. The lies we tell ourselves to survive are powerful things, potent enough to numb the truth, at least for a moment. But then the door opened again, this time with more purpose. Brenda walked in. If Leo looked scared, Brenda looked like she was on a mission, a cold, focused intent radiating from her. She was wearing her nightgown, wrapped in a thick cardigan, her arms crossed over her chest. In the night vision, her eyes reflected the camera's infrared light, glowing white like a cat's eyes in the dark, predatory and unblinking. She didn't pace. She stood perfectly still, watching Leo with an unnerving intensity. I fumbled with the volume button on my phone, pressing the speaker against my ear. The microphone on the camera was cheap, picking up the low hum of the refrigerator in the garage, the distant sigh of the wind outside. But their voices, sharp and clear, cut through the static, through the white noise of my disbelief. "I can't do it, Brenda." Leo's voice was a whine, high-pitched and trembling, pathetic. "This is crazy. He's my dad." I felt a tiny spark of hope, a microscopic ember in the ash of my soul. "See," I thought, "he loves me. He can't do it. There's still some good in him." Then Brenda moved. She closed the distance between them in 2 purposeful strides. She didn't hug him. She didn't offer comfort or reassurance. She reached out and slapped him. It wasn't a hard slap, not a violent blow, but a sharp, stinging tap on his cheek, designed to snap him to attention, to break him out of his moment of weakness. It was the way one might correct a disobedient dog. "Pull yourself together," she hissed, her voice low, venomous, a silken threat. "We talked about this. We are drowning, Leo. The loan sharks called again today. Do you want them to come here? Do you want them to hurt me?" Leo rubbed his cheek, his gaze fixed on the red gas can in his hand, a visible tremor running through his arm. "But burning the house. What if he wakes up?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "He won't wake up," Brenda said, her voice turning chillingly practical, devoid of any remorse. "I crushed 3 of his sleeping pills into his chamomile tea at dinner. He drank the whole cup. He is out cold. He wouldn't wake up if a marching band went through his bedroom." I lowered the phone from my ear, staring at it in horror. The tea. I remembered the tea. She had brought it to me with a saccharine smile, saying it would help me rest, knowing I hadn't been sleeping well since Eleanor passed. "Chamomile and honey," she'd said. I had thanked her, told her she was a good daughter-in-law, my heart heavy with a false sense of gratitude. But it had tasted bitter, metallic, utterly unlike chamomile. And because I didn't want to hurt her feelings, to acknowledge the simmering tension between us, I had poured it down the bathroom sink when her back was turned, feigning a sudden need for the restroom. That bitterness wasn't the tea leaves, it was poison. They had already tried to sedate me. The plan was already in motion. I put the phone back to my ear, my hands shaking uncontrollably now. Brenda was still talking, her hands gesturing wildly, painting a vivid, horrific picture of my demise. "Now, it's simple physics, Leo. You go down to the basement. You uncap the gas line to the old furnace. You pour a trail of gasoline from the pilot light to the stairs. You light it and you walk away. The gas explodes. The old wood catches. It looks like a tragic accident. An old man, confused, trying to light a pilot light in the cold. It happens all the time." "But the police," Leo stammered, his voice barely audible. "The police will see a faulty furnace and a senile old man." She cut him off, her voice laced with contempt. "And we will see $500,000 in life insurance plus the land value. We pay off the debts. We buy a condo in the city. We start over. Do you want to be poor forever, Leo? Do you want to spend the rest of your life changing his diapers and listening to his war stories?" I watched my son. I watched the boy I had taught to ride a bike, holding his wobbly frame as he pedaled for the first time. The boy I had held when he scraped his knee, kissing it better. The boy I had paid tuition for, even when money was tight, sacrificing my own comforts to give him a better start. I watched him weigh my life, my entire existence, against a condo in the city, against freedom from his financial woes. He looked at Brenda. He looked at the gas can, heavy and red in his trembling hand. He took a deep, shuddering breath, a sound that tore through me. "Okay," he whispered, his voice broken, defeated. "Okay." "No!" I said it out loud in the motel room, A strangled cry, a desperate plea to the empty air. "No, Leo, don't!" He turned. He didn't look back at Brenda. He walked towards the door that connected the garage to the mudroom, the door that led to the kitchen, and then to the basement stairs, the stairs that led down to the furnace that sat directly beneath my attic bedroom floor. Brenda watched him go, a satisfied, predatory smirk touching her lips, a cold, calculating victory in her eyes. She checked her fingernails, bored, as if she were waiting for a microwave to ding, not waiting for her husband to incinerate his own father. I watched Leo reach for the doorknob. His hand was shaking so badly the gas can rattled against his leg, a macabre counterpoint to the quiet night. He turned the knob. He pushed the door open. The darkness of the house, the home I built, swallowed him whole. The screen on my phone showed only the empty garage and Brenda standing there, waiting. But in my mind, I could see him. I could see him walking through the kitchen where Eleanor and I used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. I could see him opening the basement door, the familiar creak of the old wood. I could see him descending into the dark, carrying the fire that was meant to end me. I sat there, frozen, the phone burning in my hand, a conduit to my own impending doom. I was witnessing my own murder, a ghost watching my executioners. And the worst part, the truly agonizing part, wasn't the fear of death. I wasn't afraid of dying. In many ways, Harrison Caldwell, the father, the husband, had already died the moment Leo opened that door, the moment he chose money over filial love. All that was left in this cheap motel room was Arthur Finch, the witness, and the witness was consumed by a cold, hard, righteous anger. I didn't call the police. Not yet. If I called them now, Leo might hear the sirens, might stop, might feign confusion, claim he was just moving the gas can, that it was all a misunderstanding. It would be my word against theirs. They would say I was a crazy old man, paranoid and senile, just like they had planned, just like they had wanted everyone to believe. No, I needed to let them play this out. I needed to let them believe they had won. I stared at the screen, waiting for the flash, waiting for the smoke, waiting for the realization that the bed in the attic was empty, waiting for the moment they would discover their victim had walked away from the pyre. I waited to see what my son, what my daughter-in-law, would do when they realized their meticulously crafted plan had failed. The silence in the motel room was heavy, suffocating, broken only by the tiny, tinny sound of Brenda humming a tuneless melody through the phone speaker, a monstrous lullaby as she waited for the house to burn. 15 minutes can feel like a lifetime when you are waiting for your world to end. I sat on that motel bed, my eyes glued to the small, glowing screen of my phone, a window into a nightmare. My coffee, long forgotten, had gone stone cold on the nightstand. The air conditioner hummed its monotonous, broken tune, rattling under the window, but I barely heard it. All I could hear was the frantic rush of blood in my ears, a roaring river that threatened to drown me in its current. I stared at the empty garage. The concrete floor was a uniform gray. Still, eerily devoid of movement. Brenda was still there, a silent sentinel of malice. She had moved to the workbench and was idly picking at a loose strip of wood veneer, her fingernail scraping against the old sealant. She checked her watch with a casual flick of her wrist. She smoothed her hair. She looked, to an outside observer, like a woman waiting patiently for a bus, not a woman waiting for her husband to murder his father. I found myself counting the seconds, a grim, involuntary ritual. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. I wondered what was happening inside the walls I had framed with such care and pride 45 years ago. Was Leo standing at the top of the basement stairs, gas can in hand? Was he unscrewing the cap on the gas line, the one I had personally sealed for safety? I knew that old furnace better than I knew my own hands, its quirks, its dangers, its history. The pilot light assembly was tricky, a delicate operation. You had to turn the valve just right, a precise calibration. If he opened it too wide, too fast, the gas would hiss out like a nest of angry snakes, filling the basement in minutes. The fumes would rise, inexorable, through the floorboards, through every crack and crevice, seeping into the attic room, where a carefully arranged pillow now lay under the blankets, shaped to resemble a sleeping old man. I braced myself for the flash, the sudden explosion that would shatter the illusion of peace, even though I was 5 miles away in this cheap motel. I flinched every time a heavy truck rumbled past on the highway outside, its vibrations shaking the flimsy walls, convinced it was the concussive thud of my home erupting. I imagined the sound, the violent boom that would shake the very foundation, the glass blowing out of the windows, shards glittering like deadly diamonds in the night. I imagined the fire, a ravenous beast, eating the family photos on the mantelpiece, consuming the worn armchair where Eleanor used to sit and knit, her needles clicking a rhythmic song of domesticity. I waited for the sirens, their mournful wail cutting through the night. I waited for the red glow of the inferno to light up the night sky on the horizon, a beacon of my demise. But the screen remained dark, silent, green, and still. The garage remained undisturbed. Brenda stopped picking at the wood veneer. She started to tap her foot, a slow, insistent rhythm against the concrete floor. She looked at the door leading into the house, a frown deepening between her perfectly plucked eyebrows. It was taking too long. Even she knew it. Simple physics, she had said, but murder, in its brutal reality, is never simple. Then the door flew open. It banged against the wall with a force that made the camera microphone crackle, distorting the sound, a jarring intrusion into the tense silence. Leo stumbled into the frame. He was not walking anymore. He was running. He looked like he had seen a ghost. His face a mask of sheer terror, his skin the color of old ash, his eyes wide and bloodshot. He was gasping for air, his chest heaving up and down, a desperate struggle for oxygen. He still held the gas cap in one hand, clutched like a talisman, but the red canister was gone, left behind, in the basement, or perhaps the kitchen. Brenda spun around, her eyes wide, blazing with an almost feral intensity. "What happened?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, laced with a dangerous edge. "Did you light it? Why isn't it burning?" Leo grabbed her shoulders, his fingers digging into her cardigan, his grip desperate, his whole body shaking so hard his teeth were practically chattering. "He's not there, Brenda!" he choked out, his voice hoarse with panic. She stared at him, her eyes uncomprehending. "What do you mean he's not there?" "The bed." "It's empty," Leo interrupted, his words tumbling out in a torrent of fear. "I went up to check. I wanted to make sure the door was closed so the smoke would stay in. I looked at the bed. The pillows are there, under the quilt. But he's gone." "I touched the sheets, Brenda. They're ice cold. He hasn't been there for hours." For a second, there was absolute, crushing silence in the garage, a vacuum of sound that seemed to suck the very air from the room. I could hear the wind whistling through the cracks in the motel window, a distant, lonely sound. I watched the realization, slow and horrifying, wash over them both. The plan had failed, not because of a technical error, not because of a faulty mechanism, but because the victim had simply refused to participate. The target had disappeared. Brenda let out a scream of pure, unadulterated frustration. It was a guttural sound, an animalistic noise of rage and defeat. She spun around and kicked the red gas canister that sat by the mower, sending it skittering across the concrete floor with a deafening clatter. "Damn it!" she hissed, her voice a low growl. "Where is he?" Where could an old man go at 11 o'clock at night in the rain? "I don't know," Leo stammered, wringing his hands, utterly lost. "Maybe he went for a walk? Maybe he got sick and went to the hospital? Or maybe he heard us!" Brenda snapped, her voice cracking with fury. She grabbed Leo by the front of his shirt and pulled him close, her face inches from his, her eyes burning into his. "Think, you idiot. Did he seem strange at dinner? Did he say anything? Anything at all?" "No," Leo whimpered, truly terrified now. "He just drank the tea. He said he was tired. He went upstairs." "He didn't drink the tea," she said, her eyes narrowing, a dangerous glint in their depths. "He played us. That old fool played us." "We have to undo it," Leo said, panic rising in his voice, his eyes darting around wildly. "The gas! I left the valve open. The house is filling up. If he comes back and turns on the light, the switch will spark and boom. Go fix it." Brenda shoved him toward the door, her composure, for the first time, completely shattered. "Go. Turn it off. Open the windows. Get the fans running. Get the gas can out of the kitchen. If he comes back and smells gas, we tell him the furnace malfunctioned. We tell him times smelled it and saved the house. Go now. Leo scrambled back into the house, disappearing into the dark hallway, a desperate, pathetic figure. Brenda stayed in the garage, pacing back and forth like a caged tiger, her furious energy palpable even through the grainy screen. She was biting her thumbnail, her gaze darting between the driveway, her phone, and the door leading into the house, a maelstrom of thwarted ambition and desperate calculation. I watched her for a long time. I looked at the woman my son had married. I looked at the woman who had sat at my table for Thanksgiving dinners, who had accepted birthday checks from me, who had hugged me at my wife's funeral, her voice choked with what I now knew were performative sobs. I looked for any sign of relief that she hadn't become a murderer tonight. I looked for any sign of humanity, of regret, of conscience. There was none. There was only annoyance. There was only the cold, sharp calculation of a predator who had missed a meal, a hunter whose prey had inexplicably vanished. She wasn't sorry I was alive. She was angry I wasn't dead. And in that moment, sitting on the edge of that lumpy motel bed, something inside me broke. But it wasn't a break that left me weak, shattered, or weeping. It was the kind of break that happens when you snap a glow stick. It cracked with a sharp internal sound, and then, slowly, it started to shine with a cold, hard, unwavering light. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the urge to weep for the son I had lost. I had already mourned him. The man who had run out of that house with the look of a failed killer was not the boy I raised, not the man I had hoped he would become. That boy, that man, was dead. He had died the moment he chose money over his father's life, the moment he agreed to Brenda's monstrous plan. The man on the screen was a stranger, a dangerous, desperate stranger. And you don't weep for strangers who try to burn you alive. You defend yourself. You fight back. I felt a profound change in my chest. The heavy, suffocating grief that had weighed me down like a lead blanket since Eleanor died, that had numbed me to the world, began to evaporate. It was replaced by a steel rod of anger, cold, precise, and utterly unyielding. Not the hot, fiery anger that makes you scream and throw things, that consumes you in a passionate, fleeting outburst. No, this was the cold, precise anger of a craftsman who sees a job done wrong, an entire structure built on rot, and knows with absolute certainty that it must be torn down to the studs, demolished with careful, deliberate precision. They wanted my house. They wanted my money. They wanted my life. They thought I was a feeble old man, a senile burden to be discarded without a second thought, like so much construction debris. They had underestimated me. They forgot that before I was an old man, I was a man who built things to last, things that stood strong against the elements, against time. And I knew, intimately, how to demolish things that were rotten, how to dismantle a compromised structure, how to bring down a house of cards. I watched Leo run back into the garage a few minutes later, giving Brenda a quick, nervous thumbs up. They were safe. They thought they were safe. They thought they had just had a lucky escape from a bad situation, a close call with a faulty furnace. They had no idea that the real danger, the true reckoning, hadn't even started yet. I reached out and pressed the power button on my phone. The screen went black, cutting off the image of the two monsters in my garage, severing the connection. I placed the phone on the nightstand next to the cold coffee. I lay back on the lumpy pillows, staring at the faint water stain on the ceiling, its abstract shape now filled with a grim, new purpose. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't going to run away. I wasn't going to call the police immediately. Not yet. That would be too easy. That would be just a legal battle, a messy, drawn-out affair. No, I needed to teach them a lesson. I needed to show them exactly who they were dealing with, who Arthur Finch truly was. I would go back. I would walk through that front door tomorrow morning, as if nothing had happened. I would look them in the eyes. I would let them lie to me. I would let them think they were clever, that they had successfully pulled off their deception. And while they played their little game of feigned concern and relieved gratitude, I would be dismantling their lives, brick by brick, lie by meticulous lie, until their entire rotten structure came crashing down around them. I closed my eyes. For the first time in 6 months, for the first time since Eleanor's passing, I didn't pray for peace. I prayed for strength. I prayed for the ability to keep a straight face, to maintain the facade, while I looked into the faces of my would-be executioners. Tomorrow, the performance of a lifetime would begin. Arthur Finch, the victim, was gone. Arthur Finch, the architect of their ruin, was just waking up. The morning sun, ironically, felt like an insult as I pulled my old Ford truck into the driveway of 17 Briarwood Lane. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, the kind of crisp autumn morning that usually made me want to sit on the porch swing with a steaming cup of coffee and watch the squirrels chase each other across the manicured lawn. But today, the house did not look like a home. It looked like a crime scene that hadn't yet been marked off with yellow tape. It looked like a tomb that had failed to close its doors, its secrets exposed to the harsh light of day. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had turned white, bloodless against the tanned skin. I had to consciously force my fingers to uncurl, one by one, a slow, deliberate act of will. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked terrible. My eyes were bloodshot from a sleepless night spent staring at a motel ceiling, and my gray stubble was thicker than usual, a testament to my neglect. Good. It fit the part I had to play. I wasn't the sharp, vigilant contractor anymore. Today, I had to be the confused, fragile old man they wanted me to be, the senile burden they so desperately wished to be rid of. I took a deep, shaky breath, inhaling the familiar scent of old upholstery and stale coffee in the cab, a final moment of respite. Then I stepped out. The walk up the driveway felt like walking the plank. Every step, heavy, deliberate, a prelude to a reckoning. I looked at the garage door, the same door I had watched on my phone screen just hours ago, a silent witness to their monstrous intent. It was closed now, concealing the secrets of the night before, a smooth, blank facade of normalcy. I reached for my keys, but before I could even slide them into the lock, the front door flew open. It was theatrical, almost comical in its exaggerated urgency, if it wasn't so deadly serious. "Dad!" It was Leo. He was wearing the same clothes he'd had on in the video, his face gray, his eyes darting around nervously like he was expecting the police to jump out from behind the azalea bushes. He rushed down the porch steps and grabbed me in a hug that felt desperate and suffocating, more about his own terror than any genuine affection. "Oh, thank God." Brenda cried out, appearing in the doorway behind him. She was wearing a perfectly clean apron over her clothes, her hair pulled back in a severe, almost militaristic bun. She looked the part of the worried housewife to perfection, a master of domestic performance. "Where have you been, Arthur? We've been out of our minds with worry." I let Leo hold me for a second longer than comfortable, forcing myself not to pull away. I could feel his heart racing against my chest, a frantic, erratic thumping. It wasn't the rapid beat of relief. It was the frantic, chaotic thumping of pure panic. He smelled of sour sweat, of desperation, and something faintly floral, like he had bathed in cheap air freshener to cover up the lingering scent of gasoline. I gently pushed him away and looked at him. I tried, with a desperate longing, to find the little boy I used to take fishing, the teenager I taught to drive, the young man who once looked up to me. But all I saw was a stranger with shifty eyes and a weak chin, a man devoid of the warmth and innocence I remembered. "I'm sorry," I rasped, letting my voice crack just a little, a touch of frailty. "It was a long night." Leo stepped back, wringing his hands, a nervous tick. "Dad, you don't understand. You could have died. We almost all died." I looked at him, blinking slowly, feigning confusion, the old man mystified by their sudden histrionics. "What are you talking about, son?" "The furnace," Leo blurted out, the words tumbling out of his mouth too fast, a desperate confession wrapped in a lie. "Last night, about 11 o'clock. Brenda smelled it first. Gas. The whole house smelled like rotten eggs. It was suffocating, Dad. I ran down to the basement, and the old valve on the furnace had just blown. It was leaking everywhere. If anyone had flipped a light switch, the whole place would have gone up in flames." He paused, waiting for my reaction, searching my face for any sign of recognition. of accusation. I stared at him, marveling at the audacity of the lie. It was a good lie, plausible. It covered the smell of the gas he had poured. It explained why he was in the basement at that hour. It made them the heroes, the dutiful children saving their elderly father from a tragic accident. Brenda walked down the steps and took my arm, her grip firm and possessive, a silent warning. "We ran up to your room, Arthur. We were screaming your name. We were going to drag you out of bed to save you. But when we got there, the bed was empty. We were so scared. We thought maybe you had wandered off and gotten lost in the dark. We called your phone, but it went straight to voicemail." I looked at her. Her eyes were dry. There was no redness, no puffiness, no trace of the tears she claimed to have shed. Just a cold, hard stare that dared me to contradict her, a challenge I could not yet accept. "We checked the yard," Leo added quickly, jumping in to bolster her story. "We checked the street. We didn't know what to do. We fixed the leak, obviously. I managed to shut the valve off, and we aired the house out all night. That's why it's so cold inside. But, Dad, where were you? Why weren't you in bed?" Here. It was the moment of truth. If I told them I knew what had happened, the charade would be over. They might panic. They might get violent. Desperate people resorting to desperate measures. I wasn't ready for that. I needed time. I needed to get my ducks in a row, to gather my strength, to prepare for the final confrontation. I slumped my shoulders, letting my posture collapse a little more, allowing the image of an exhausted old man to fully manifest. I rubbed my chest, right over my heart, feigning discomfort. I didn't want to worry you," I stammered, looking down at my scuffed work boots, a picture of shame and reluctance. About 8 o'clock, I started feeling this pressure right here in my chest. It was tight, hard to breathe. I didn't want to be a burden. "I know you two have so much going on with your investments and all." I saw Leo flinch slightly at the word investments. "So I got in the truck and drove to that 24-hour urgent care clinic over on 4th Street. Leo's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine fear passing through them. "A heart attack? Did you have a heart attack, Dad?" No. I waved my hand dismissively, playing the part perfectly. I got there, and the waiting room was full, packed. I sat down in one of those uncomfortable chairs to wait my turn. It was warm in there. I must have dozed off. When I woke up, the pain was gone, probably just indigestion or stress. I felt foolish, so I just came home. My phone died in the car, battery's getting old. I watched the tension visibly drain from Leo's body. It was physical. His shoulders dropped. He let out a long, shaky breath, a gust of wind escaping a deflated sail. He believed me. He believed that his father was just a confused old man who fell asleep in waiting rooms and didn't want to be a bother. It fit his narrative perfectly, confirming his image of me as a weak, easily manipulated target. Brenda, however, narrowed her eyes slightly. She was sharper than him, more calculating. "Indigestion," she repeated slowly, testing the word on her tongue, her gaze scrutinizing me, searching for any tell. Well, thank heavens it wasn't serious. "But Arthur, you really shouldn't be driving when you feel like that. You should have told us. We're here to take care of you, remember?" The irony of her words almost made me laugh out loud. A bitter, hollow sound that would have shattered my facade. Take care of me? Like she tried to take care of me last night, with a gas can and a match? "I know, Brenda," I said, keeping my voice meek, humble, subservient. "I'm sorry. I get confused sometimes. My memory isn't what it used to be." "Come inside," she said, her grip still firm on my arm, steering me toward the front door with surprising force. "You look exhausted. I'll make you some fresh coffee and breakfast. You need to eat." We walked into the house. The smell hit me immediately. They had opened all the windows, desperately trying to air out the stench of their failed attempt. But the underlying scent of gasoline was still there, faint and oily, masked by an aggressive, cloying layer of lemon furniture polish and lavender room spray. It smelled like a funeral home trying to mask the scent of embalming fluid. I walked into the kitchen. My kitchen. The kitchen where I had cooked dinner for Eleanor and Leo for 40 years, where we'd celebrated countless birthdays, where life had unfolded around the worn oak table. It felt alien now, desecrated. Brenda bustled around, filling the kettle, getting mugs down from the cupboard with an almost frantic energy. Leo sat at the table, his head in his hands, staring blankly at the wood grain, as if it held the answers to his failures, to his mounting debts. I sat opposite him. I looked at the dark circles under his eyes, the visible tremor in his hands. He hadn't slept. Good. I hoped he saw me burning every time he closed his eyes. "So, Dad," Leo said, without looking up, his voice hollow. "The furnace. It's broken for good. I think we really need to replace it. It's dangerous." "I'll take a look at it later," I said casually, my voice feigning disinterest, hoping to draw them out. "No!" Brenda spun around from the counter, a little too quickly, her voice sharp, agitated. "No, Arthur. You stay away from the basement." Leo shut the gas off. "But we don't want you down there. It's steep and dark. We'll call a professional. We'll handle it." They didn't want me to see the evidence. They didn't want me to see the cap that had been wrenched off, the scratches on the concrete floor where the gas can had been dragged. "Fine," I said, a slight shrug of acceptance. "Whatever you think is best." Brenda placed a steaming mug of coffee in front of me, her smile tight. "Drink up. It will warm you." I looked at the black liquid. I wondered if she had put anything in it this time. Probably not. Not in broad daylight. Not when I had just claimed to have been at an urgent care clinic where there might be a record of my visit. She was smart enough to know that a dead body turning up hours after a purported medical scare would look incredibly suspicious. I took a sip. It was bitter but clean. "I need some sugar," I said, standing up, my voice still a little shaky. "I'll get it," Brenda said, but I was already moving, walking toward the counter where the sugar bowl usually sat. As I passed the small side table where we kept the mail, usually a chaotic jumble of bills and circulars, I saw it. It was a piece of paper, crumpled up into a tight, angry ball, as if someone had tried to throw it away in a fit of rage and missed the trash can. It was half hidden behind the toaster, an afterthought. My heart gave a little jump, a sudden spike of adrenaline. I glanced at Brenda. Her back was turned, as she was fiddling with the stove. Leo was still staring at the table, lost in his misery. I reached out my hand, moving faster than a 7-1-year-old man should, my movement swift and silent. I snatched the paper ball and shoved it deep into the pocket of my jacket. "Here's the sugar," Brenda said, turning around, holding the ceramic bowl. I smiled at her, a weak, grateful smile. "Thank you, dear." I sat back down and stirred the sugar into my coffee. My hand brushed against the crumpled paper in my pocket. It felt hot, like a burning coal, radiating a dangerous energy. I waited. I drank the coffee slowly, deliberately, making small talk about the weather, about the clinic, asking them if they had slept well, if they were still worried about the furnace. It was torture, every false word a twist of the knife, but I endured it. After 10 minutes, I stood up. "I'm going to go upstairs and wash up," I said, feigning exhaustion. "I feel grimy after last night." "Take your time, Arthur," Brenda said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We'll be here." I walked up the stairs, my knees protesting every step. I didn't go to the attic room. I went to the main bathroom, the one they hadn't claimed yet, the one that was still, blessedly, mine. I locked the door. I turned on the faucet, letting the water run loud, a rushing cascade designed to cover any sound. I pulled the paper out of my pocket. My fingers trembled as I smoothed it out on the cool marble countertop. It was wrinkled and stained with a ring of coffee, but the bold red letters stamped across the top were unmistakable. Final notice. It was a bank statement, but not from a regular, reputable bank. It was from a private lending firm, the kind that operates out of strip malls and storefronts, charging exorbitant interest rates that should be illegal, preying on desperation. The account was in Leo's name. I scanned the numbers, my eyes widening with each digit. Past due amount, $25,000. Total outstanding balance, $212,000. $212,000. I stared at the number, the decimal points blurring. It wasn't just bad investments, as Leo had claimed. You don't lose 200 grand on bad stocks without noticing. This was gambling. This was high-risk, reckless speculation. This was a hole so deep you couldn't climb out of it. You could only be buried in it. At the bottom of the page, scrawled in thick black marker, was a handwritten note. It wasn't a friendly reminder. It said simply, Friday or else. Today was Wednesday. They had 2 days. The air left my lungs in a rush, a silent gasp of understanding. It wasn't just greed that drove them. It was desperation. Raw, bone-deep, existential desperation. They weren't just trying to get rich. They were trying to survive. The loan sharks, the Russians as Brenda had called them in the recording, were coming for them. And I, Arthur Finch, was the only asset they had liquid enough to cover the debt. My life insurance and the house. That was the cold, brutal math. My life was worth exactly $212,000 to my son. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The face staring back at me was pale and lined, etched with fatigue and betrayal, but the eyes were hard, cold, resolute. I carefully refolded the paper and tucked it into my wallet, safely behind my driver's license. Evidence. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. This was the motive. This was the smoking gun. I turned off the faucet. The sudden silence of the house pressed in on me, heavy, expectant. I knew they were downstairs, whispering, planning their next move. They had failed last night, but Friday was coming. Desperate people do desperate things, and they were running out of time. I unlocked the bathroom door. I had to go back down there. I had to play the part. But now I knew. The clock was ticking for both of us. They had 48 hours to kill me, and I had 48 hours to destroy them first. I told Brenda I was going to the hardware store to look at prices for a new furnace. It was a flimsy excuse, barely credible, but she was too busy frantically texting on her phone, probably trying to buy more time with their creditors, to truly care. I walked out of that house, feeling the weight of the crumbling financial statement in my wallet, burning a hole against my hip, a constant, painful reminder of their treachery. I didn't go to the hardware store. I drove straight to the public library. It had started to rain again, a cold, persistent drizzle that turned the world gray, washing out the colors, mirroring the somber landscape of my soul. When I pulled into the parking lot, my eyes went immediately to the bench near the entrance. He was there. Samuel. Sam. He was huddled under the overhang, his army coat pulled tight around him, protecting him from the damp, from the biting wind. To anyone else passing by, he was just a lump of discarded humanity, a piece of scenery to be ignored, to be pitied, to be looked through. But to me, he was the only person in the world who had told me the truth, who had seen me, who had saved me. I parked the truck and walked over to him. I didn't bring coffee this time. I didn't have a $10 bill ready in my hand. I wasn't coming as a benefactor, offering charity. I was coming as a man seeking answers, seeking an ally. I sat down on the wet bench right next to him. The wood was cold and hard, the damp seeping through my jeans, but I barely noticed. Sam didn't move at first. He kept his head down, staring at his worn boots, which were wrapped in plastic bags to keep out the water, a testament to his resourcefulness in adversity. "You didn't go home," he said, his voice rough, like gravel grinding together, yet with a hint of something deeper, something knowing. "No," I said, staring out at the parking lot, watching the rain hit the windshields of the cars, each drop a tiny explosion. "I went to a motel. You saved my life, Sam." He finally looked up. Under the hood of his coat, his face was a map of deep lines and weathered skin, testament to a hard life lived on the fringes. But his eyes were clear. They were a piercing blue, intelligent, and alert. They were not the eyes of a man lost in madness or addled by drink. They were the eyes of a man who missed nothing, who saw everything, who had a sharp, observational mind. "Who are you?" I asked him, turning to face him fully, my voice unwavering. "You knew about the furnace. You knew about the address. You aren't just some guy living on a bench. Who are you, really?" Sam let out a sigh that seemed to rattle in his chest, a deep, weary sound. He reached into his deep, voluminous pockets and pulled out a pack of cigarettes, worn and crumpled. He offered me one, but I shook my head, my focus intense. He lit one, shielding the flame from the wind with practiced ease. His movements economical, deliberate. He took a long drag, the cherry of the cigarette glowing bright in the damp gloom, and exhaled, the smoke mingling with the mist. "I used to be a lot of things, Arthur," he said quietly, his voice imbued with a melancholic gravitas. "A husband, a father, a homeowner, a taxpayer." He paused, taking another drag. "But before the bottle took the last of my dignity, before the streets became my home, I was a private investigator. A damn good one, too." I stared at him, surprised, but not shocked. It made a strange, unsettling sense. The way he watched people, the way he noticed details, the way he seemed to absorb the world around him. "For 30 years, I specialized in insurance fraud," he continued, looking at the glowing ember of his cigarette, his eyes distant, lost in memory. "I worked for the big companies. When a warehouse burned down conveniently after a bad quarter, they sent me. When a husband fell off a boat right after doubling his policy, they sent me. I knew how to spot a liar from a mile away. I knew how to find the accelerant. I knew how to find the motive." He paused again, his expression darkening, a shadow passing over his face. "Then life happened. My daughter got sick. A rare, aggressive cancer. The insurance company I spent my life protecting denied her claim, saying it was a pre-existing condition, a loophole in the fine print. We lost everything trying to save her. Then I lost my wife to grief, to despair. And then I lost myself. Now I'm just Sam, the guy who sleeps behind the library dumpsters, the invisible man." He took another drag, flicked the ash away with a practiced gesture, a man resigned to his fate. "But you never lose the instinct, Arthur. You never stop watching. It's a curse, really. Most people walk past me, and they don't see me," he went on, his voice gaining a quiet intensity. "I'm invisible. I'm just part of the trash, part of the scenery they ignore. They talk on their phones. They argue with their spouses. They count their money. They do it all right in front of me because they think I'm too crazy or too drunk to understand. But I understand everything." He turned those sharp blue eyes on me, his gaze piercing, unwavering. "3 days ago, your son and that woman he married, Brenda, they sat on this very bench. Right here." My blood ran cold. Leo and Brenda. "Here. They parked that fancy sports car of his over there by the hydrants," Sam said, pointing with a yellowed finger, his memory precise. "They bought sandwiches from the deli. They sat right here. I was sitting on the ground, pretending to read a discarded newspaper. But I was listening. They didn't even look at me. They just started talking." "What did they say?" I asked, though I already knew the answer, a sickening dread twisting in my gut. "They were arguing," Sam said, his voice flat, devoid of judgment. "The woman, Brenda, she was vicious. She was talking about numbers. $200,000 by Friday. She kept saying it over and over. Friday or else. She said you were the only asset they had left that wasn't frozen or leveraged. She called you a stubborn old goat who wouldn't die fast enough." I felt a wave of nausea, a cold, bitter bile rising in my throat. Hearing it from him, from an impartial witness, was somehow worse, far more brutal, than merely seeing the bank statement. It made it real in a way that paper couldn't. It gave their malice a voice. Leo was crying. Sam went on, his voice softening slightly. He was scared. He kept asking if there was another way, if they could borrow from a friend. Brenda just laughed at him. She said, "Nobody lends money to a man who owes the Russians." That's when she brought up the furnace. She laid it all out, Arthur. The broken valve, the sleeping pills, the ventilation shaft. She had researched it. She knew exactly how the airflow in your house worked. I gripped the edge of the bench, my knuckles white, my rage a slow, burning fire in my belly. She planned it all. She's the architect. Sam nodded, his expression grim. "Your son is just the labor, the weak link." But he agreed. That's the sad part. He sat right there, ate a turkey sandwich, and agreed to kill his father because he was too scared to face his debts. Too weak to stand up to her, or to his own consequences. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling, not from fear, but from a barely contained fury. I clenched them into fists, nails digging into my palms. "Why did you warn me?" I asked, looking back at him. "You could have stayed out of it. You could have let it happen. it wouldn't have affected you. Sam shrugged, a small, tired movement. You bring me coffee. You look me in the eye. You say, "Thank you. In 5 years on these streets, Arthur, you're one of 3 people who ever treated me like a human being. Not a piece of trash. Not a ghost. I couldn't let them turn you into ash, Arthur. I just couldn't." He reached into his coat again, digging around past layers of old receipts and candy wrappers, past the debris of his life on the streets. He pulled out a phone. It wasn't a smartphone. It was an ancient flip phone, taped together with duct tape, its screen scratched and cloudy, a relic from another era. "I kept this for emergencies," he said, holding it up. "I don't have service, obviously, but the voice recorder still works. Old habits die hard. When I heard them talking about the gas, I turned it on. I thought maybe I could take it to the police. But who listens to a homeless man? They would say I doctored it. They would say I was looking for a payout." He pressed a button on the side of the phone and held it out between us. A small, innocuous device holding a universe of evil. There was a burst of static, then the sound of wind. Then Brenda's voice cut through the noise, clear and undeniably chilling. "If we don't have the insurance money secured by Friday, the loan sharks aren't just going to break your legs, Leo. They said they'll take a finger for every 10,000 we're short. Do you want to lose your hands? Because I don't. The old man has lived a long life. It's mercy, really. One night of gas, and he just goes to sleep. We get the payout. We pay the Russians, and we start over. It's him or us, Leo. Choose." Then Leo's voice, shaky and weak, barely audible. Okay, Brenda. We do it. Thursday night, when he's asleep." Sam clicked the button, and the recording stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, pregnant with the weight of their calculated malice. "Friday," I whispered, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Today is Wednesday. That leaves tomorrow night. Thursday night." "That is tonight," Sam said grimly, confirming my worst fears. "They missed their chance yesterday because you weren't there. But the deadline hasn't changed. The Russians don't give extensions. If they don't have the money, or proof that the money is coming, by Friday, they are dead. Which means you have to be dead by tomorrow morning. Tonight, they were going to try again tonight. The gas didn't work, so they would try something else. A fall down the stairs. An accidental overdose of pills. A pillow over the face. Desperation makes people creative, but also sloppy. I looked at the old flip phone in Sam's hand. That right there was my salvation. That was the proof that it wasn't an accident. That was concrete evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. "Can I have that?" I asked him, my voice barely a whisper. Sam looked at the phone, then at me, his blue eyes assessing. He didn't hand it over immediately. He held it tight, almost possessively. "You can have it," he said. "But you need to be careful, Arthur. These people are backed into a corner. A rat in a corner will bite. If you walk in there waving this around, they might just kill you right there and take their chances with the cops. You need to be smart." "I am done being a victim," I said, my voice hardening, the steel rod of anger now fully forged. "I am going to finish this, but I can't do it alone." Sam studied my face, his gaze penetrating, unwavering. A slow smile spread across his cracked lips, showing yellowed teeth. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was a wolfish smile, the smile of a man who hadn't had a purpose, a challenge, in a very long time. "I haven't worked a case in 15 years, he said, a spark lighting in his eyes. "I missed the thrill. I missed the hunt." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. I took out all the cash I had. It was about $400, a small fortune to him, a token to me. I pressed it into his hand. "This isn't charity," I said, looking him squarely in the eye. "This is a retainer. I am hiring you, Samuel Hayes, my private investigator." Sam looked at the money, then back at me. He straightened his spine, sitting up a little taller, a subtle shift in his posture, a flicker of his former self. He put the money in his pocket and buttoned the flap, a gesture of quiet dignity. "If we're going to do this, we need to do it right," he said, his voice losing the rough, street-worn edge and taking on a professional, clipped tone. "We have the motive. We have the confession on tape. But we need to catch them in the act. We need them to commit to the crime one more time, so there's no wiggling out of it in court. We need to trap them. How? I asked, leaning forward, my heart pounding with a renewed sense of purpose. Sam tapped his temple with a knowing grin. We play on their greed. Greed is a blinder, Arthur. It makes people stupid. They'll trip over their own feet trying to snatch a fortune. He paused. But first we need legal counsel, not a public defender. We need a shark, someone who hates bullies as much as you do. I know someone, I said, a name flashing in my mind, a memory from my construction days. Sharon Hayes. She was a young lawyer. I had done a renovation for a few years back. Just starting out, struggling to make ends meet. She was tough, smart, and she owed me a favor for fixing her roof for cost when she was just starting out. Good, Sam said, standing up. His joints popped, protesting the sudden movement, but he moved with a new energy, a revitalized spring in his step. You call her. I'll get cleaned up. If I'm going to be your investigator, I can't look like I sleep under a bridge. I stood up with him. The rain had stopped. The gray clouds were breaking apart, revealing a sliver of pale, hopeful sky. One more thing, Sam said, his blue eyes gleaming with an almost youthful mischief. Do you still have access to that camera in your garage? Yes, I said, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. Good, he said, because tonight we're going to turn your house into a stage, Arthur. And your son and his wife are going to be the stars of their own tragedy. I watched him walk toward the public restrooms, his step lighter, more purposeful than it had been minutes ago. He wasn't Sam, the homeless man, anymore. He was Samuel Hayes, the investigator. And he was back on the job. I pulled out my phone and dialed Sharon's number. It was time to set the trap. It was time to end this. I watched from the corner of the street until Leo's flashy sports car pulled out of the driveway, its engine roaring a dismissive farewell to the neighborhood. Brenda was in the passenger seat, already arguing on her phone, probably trying to buy more time with their impatient creditors, her voice a sharp, cutting sound even from this distance. They were gone. I had maybe an hour, perhaps even less, before they returned. I walked back to the house, my heart beating a frantic rhythm of dread against my ribs, a drum solo of impending confrontation. I felt like a burglar in my own home, tiptoeing around ghosts. I unlocked the front door, the click of the tumbler sounding impossibly loud in the hushed evening, and stepped into the silence. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, expectant silence of a place that held too many secrets, too many whispered lies. I didn't go to the kitchen. I didn't go to the attic room. I went straight to the master bedroom. The room that used to be mine and Eleanor's. The room they had claimed for themselves the week after the funeral, a symbol of their swift, ruthless takeover. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the comforting scent of lavender and old paper that Eleanor loved, the gentle aroma of a life lived with grace. No, this was the cloying, aggressive smell of Brenda's expensive, sickly sweet perfume, mingling with the stale odor of Leo's unwashed gym clothes, piled in a heap in the corner like discarded refuse. They had turned our sanctuary, our most intimate space, into a pigsty, a testament to their self-absorption and disrespect. I walked to the walk-in closet, a space that once held Eleanor's beautiful dresses and my work clothes. Eleanor and I had bought a heavy steel safe 20 years ago, a sturdy fortress for our most precious documents. We kept it bolted securely to the floor in the back of the closet, hidden behind the winter coats, a place of ultimate security. We kept our birth certificates there, the deed to the house, our life insurance policies, the small velvet bag with Eleanor's grandmother's diamond brooch, a precious family heirloom. I pushed aside Brenda's hanging dresses, their silks and chiffons rustling with a soft, mocking sound. The safe was there. At first glance it looked normal, undisturbed, but I was a contractor. I noticed details. I noticed things that didn't sit right, imperfections in the facade. There were tiny, almost imperceptible metal shavings on the carpet fibers around the base, glittering faintly like gold dust in the dim light. I knelt down, my old knees cracking a protest. A sharp pang of pain. I ran my thumb over the dial. It felt loose, almost wobbly. There was a small scratch right above the keyhole, barely visible, unless you were looking for it with a craftsman's eye. It had been filled in with something waxy, probably shoe polish, a clumsy attempt to hide the mark, to obscure their violation. They hadn't guessed the combination? No. They had drilled it, or they had hired someone to bypass it, someone with specialized tools, and then tried to cover their tracks. My stomach turned, a bitter wave of nausea. They had violated the one place I thought was secure, the last bastion of my privacy, of Eleanor's memory. I turned the dial to our combination anyway. Right to 10, left to 24, right to 51. The dates of our wedding, our anniversary, a code whispered between lovers. The handle turned with a smooth, soft click. The internal mechanism had been reset, but they had kept the original code, probably to avoid raising suspicion if I ever tried to open it, if I ever suspected. I pulled the heavy door open. The interior light flickered on, illuminating the contents. It looked organized. The stacks of papers were neat, almost pristine, but the velvet bag was gone. Eleanor's grandmother's brooch, a piece of family history, gone. I knew it would be. Brenda had probably pawned it months ago, a quick, anonymous transaction for cash. But the jewelry was the least of my worries. I reached for the faded blue folder labeled Eleanor. This was the insurance payout from her death, $300,000. We had planned to use it for my care later in life, or to help the grandkids with college, a legacy of love and foresight. I opened the folder. It was empty. No, not entirely empty. There was a single bank statement at the very back. It showed a series of transfers. $50,000, then $900, then $950. All moved to an account under the name L&B Ventures, Leo and Brenda. The dates were from 3 months ago, right after they had so kindly kicked me out of the master bedroom. I flipped to the authorization forms. There it was, my signature, Arthur Finch. But it wasn't my hand. The loops on the A were too wide. The slant was wrong. It was a forgery. A good one, practiced, almost convincing, but a forgery nonetheless. They had stolen my wife's legacy. Every single cent she had left to protect me, to ensure my comfort, was gone. I felt a hot tear leak out of my eye, a single rogue drop, but I wiped it away angrily. I didn't have time for grief, for sentimentality. I needed clarity. I needed vengeance. I reached for the next folder. Arthur, my policy. It was a whole life policy I had paid into for 30 years. A steady, dependable investment. It had a cash value, but the death benefit was the real prize. $500,000. I pulled out the beneficiary designation form. The original form from 1995 listed Eleanor as the primary beneficiary. If she predeceased me, it was supposed to go to a trust for the grandchildren, a future gift for their education. But that page was gone. In its place was a new form, dated 4 months ago. Primary beneficiary, Leo Finch. Relationship, son. Contingent beneficiary, Brenda Finch. The signature at the bottom was shaky. It looked exactly like the signature of a senile old man. They had practiced. They had practiced being me, so they could profit from my death. It wasn't just about the furnace. They had been planning this for months. A slow, methodical unraveling of my life, a careful rerouting of my assets. They had set up the financial dominoes, one by excruciating one, so that the moment my heart stopped, or the moment the house exploded, the money would flow directly, seamlessly, into their pockets. I put the folder down, my hands trembling with a cold, righteous rage. I reached for the last document, the most important one, the very symbol of my life's work, the deed to the house. 17 Briarwood Lane, paid off in full in 1998, a source of immense pride, a monument to my labor. It was the only thing I truly owned, the only thing that was supposed to be safe. I searched the stack. I looked under the birth certificates. I looked under the old tax returns. The deed was gone. In its place was a thick document, stapled together with a glossy business card clipped to the front. The card read, Apex Financial Solutions. Fast cash. No questions asked. We lend when others won't. A predatory title loan company. I opened the document. It wasn't a mortgage. No reputable bank would give a mortgage on a house occupied by a 7-1-year-old man without his direct, explicit consent. This was a lien, a high-interest collateral loan. They had taken the physical deed, the actual piece of paper that proved ownership, and they had given it to a shark. I scanned the terms. They had borrowed $150,000 against the house, using it as collateral. The interest rate was predatory, usurious, 28%, and there was a clause, in bold print, at the very bottom. Failure to repay in full by November 15th will result in immediate forfeiture of property titles. November 15th. That was tomorrow. Friday. The pieces finally clicked together, assembling into a horrifying mosaic of desperation. The $212,000 they owed the Russians. The $150,000 they owed the title loan company. They had leveraged everything. They had borrowed against the house to pay the gambling debts. And now the title loan was due at the same time as the loan sharks. They were drowning, not just in debt, but in every conceivable direction, the walls closing in. If I died tonight, the life insurance would pay out $500,000. They would pay off the title loan to get the house back. They would pay off the Russians to save their fingers. And they would still have money left over to buy that condo in the city, to start their gilded, selfish new life. I was not a father to them. I was a piggy bank that they needed to smash open to survive their own stupidity, their own reckless choices. I stared at the papers, a cold fury settling deep in my bones. This was the motive. This was the irrefutable proof. Samuel had the recording of their intent. I had the paper trail of their desperation, their calculated financial maneuvering. Suddenly, I heard a sound that made my blood freeze in my veins, the rumble of an engine. It was distinct, the low, throaty growl of Leo's sports car. He was back. They were early. They weren't supposed to be back for hours. Panic, sharp and visceral, spiked in my chest. I was sitting on the floor of their bedroom, surrounded by the damning evidence of their crimes. If they found me here, if they saw that I knew everything, the charade would be over. They wouldn't wait for the furnace. They would push me down the stairs. They would smother me with a pillow right here on this floor. Desperate people, cornered rats, don't negotiate. They attack. I heard the garage door opening, the mechanical whine of the chain drive vibrating through the floorboards, a sound of inevitable approach. I scrambled. My old knees protested, sending sharp stabs of pain through my joints as I shoved the papers back into the folders. I didn't have time to organize them perfectly, to meticulously restore them to their previous state. I jammed Eleanor's file to the back. I slid the title loan document under the old tax returns. I threw the life insurance policy on top, a desperate, clumsy effort to conceal my intrusion. I grabbed the heavy door of the safe. I slammed it shut with a resounding thud. I spun the dial. 1 turn, 2 turns. I yanked the handle to make sure it was locked, to ensure its secrets were once again secure. It held. I stood up, dizzy from the sudden movement, a wave of lightheadedness washing over me. I smoothed the winter coats back over the safe, trying to make it look undisturbed. I backed out of the closet. I heard the door from the garage opening into the kitchen downstairs. I heard Brenda's voice, shrill and angry. "I told you we should have checked the account balance before we left," she was shouting. I heard Leo's footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor, a sound of approaching doom. "Shut up, Brenda, just shut up." I'm thinking. They were in the kitchen. They were heading for the stairs. I looked around the room, frantically scanning for any sign of my presence. Had I left anything? A footprint on the plush carpet? A moved pillow? It looked okay. I moved to the bedroom door. I opened it a crack. I could hear them coming up. They were on the landing. I couldn't go down the stairs. I would run right into them. I looked frantically for an escape. The door to the attic stairs was 10 feet away. Too far. But the door to the main bathroom was closer. Just a few steps. I threw myself toward the bathroom door. I grabbed the handle and slipped inside, just as Leo turned the corner at the top of the stairs, his face a mask of frustration. I clicked the lock silently, the small sound echoing in the sudden silence. I leaned against the door, holding my breath, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the wood. I heard Leo walk past, I heard him go into the master bedroom. Where is he? Brenda asked from the hallway, her voice right outside the bathroom door. A chilling proximity. Probably sleeping, Leo grunted from the bedroom, his voice laced with annoyance. Or staring at the wall in the attic. Who cares? I turned on the faucet again, the rushing water a shield against their voices. I washed my hands, scrubbing them furiously, trying to wash away the feeling of violation, of treachery. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to clear the haze of fear and anger. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, lined with exhaustion and stress, but my eyes were burning, alight with a fierce, unwavering resolve. I had seen the truth. I had seen the depth of their betrayal. They had sold my past to pay for their mistakes, and now they were coming for my future. I turned off the water. I unlocked the door. I opened it and stepped out into the hallway. Brenda was standing there, holding a laundry basket, her back to me. She jumped when she saw me, startled. "Jesus, Arthur!" she snapped, her hand flying to her chest. "You scared me?" I smiled at her. It was a weak, tired smile. The smile of a confused old man. "Sorry, Brenda," I rasped, my voice still a little shaky. "I just needed to use the restroom. The one upstairs has a drip. It keeps me awake." She eyed me suspiciously, her gaze flicking from my face to the bathroom door, then back to me, trying to gauge if my story was true. "Well, go take a nap," she said dismissively, waving a hand, a dismissive gesture. "You look like death warmed over." I nodded, a humble, obedient gesture. "I will," I said. "I will go rest." I walked past her, my steps slow and deliberate, feigning infirmity. I climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, my sanctuary, my prison. As I lay down on the cot, listening to them moving around downstairs, their voices a low murmur of discontent, I knew one thing for certain. Tonight was the night. They had run out of time. The money was due tomorrow. The title loan was due tomorrow. They would come for me tonight. But I was ready. I had the team. I had the plan. And now I had the fire in my belly to burn their whole world down before they could strike a match to mine. I drove to the downtown office of Sharon Hayes with my heart in my throat, a mixture of apprehension and grim determination. The last time I had seen Sharon, she was a fresh law school graduate, bright-eyed and idealistic, living in a fixer-upper row house that leaked every time it rained. I had reshingled her roof for the cost of materials, a favor, a small act of kindness, because I knew what it was like to start with nothing, to build something from the ground up. Now, her office was on the 10th floor of a sleek glass building, commanding a panoramic view of the river, its waters glinting in the afternoon sun. She had done well for herself. She was known as a pit bull in the courtroom, a woman who fought fiercely for the underdogs and tore bullies apart with surgical precision. She was exactly what I needed. When I walked into her conference room, Samuel was already there, looking remarkably uncomfortable in a suit I had bought him at a thrift store on the way over. He looked like a retired professor, or a distinguished, if slightly disheveled, scholar, not a man who slept on a park bench. He had played the part of the distinguished investigator perfectly. Sharon sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, her face pale, her jaw set tight, listening intently to the recording on Sam's old flip phone. When the recording finished, she didn't say a word for a long minute. She just stared at the device, as if it were a loaded gun, its silent presence menacing. "This is conspiracy to commit murder, Arthur," she said finally, her voice low, dangerous, infused with a cold, righteous anger. "We have enough here to put them away for 20 years, easily. I can have the police at your house in an hour. We can end this right now." I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. "No, Sharon, not yet." She looked at me, incredulous, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Arthur, they are trying to kill you tonight. You heard them. Friday is the deadline. If we don't act, they will try again. They'll find another way." "If you call the police now," I said, leaning forward, my hands clasped on the polished mahogany table, my voice steady despite the turmoil within me. "They go to jail. Yes, but the house is lost. They took a title loan against the deed, Sharon, a predatory loan. If I don't pay it off by tomorrow, the lender seizes the property. If Leo goes to jail, the loan defaults immediately. I lose the house I built. I lose the land my wife loved. I lose everything except my life. And at my age, Sharon, a life without a home, a life without roots, isn't much of a life at all. Sharon tapped her pen on the legal pad, her brow furrowed in thought, her brilliant legal mind calculating the angles. So, you want to save the house first? I want to save the house, I said, my voice hardening, imbued with a steely conviction. And I want to teach them a lesson. I don't just want them in handcuffs. I want them to feel what I felt. I want them to feel the hope of a future, the promise of security, and then have it ripped away, violently, irrevocably. I want to break them, Sharon, to utterly shatter their world, just as they tried to shatter mine. Sharon looked at me, and for the first time, she didn't see the kindly old contractor who had fixed her leaky roof. She saw a father who had been pushed too far, a man driven to the brink by betrayal, seeking not just justice, but a profound, cathartic reckoning. She nodded slowly, a small, sharp smile, almost predatory, appearing on her face. "Okay, Arthur," she said, her voice firm, resolute. "We do it your way. But we need to buy time. If the deadline is tomorrow, we need to give them a reason to keep you alive past Friday. We need to give them something worth more than the insurance money. Something that will override their fear. We give them greed," Samuel chimed in, his voice raspy, a knowing glint in his eye. "Greed is the only thing stronger than their fear of the Russians, stronger than their desperation. It's the ultimate motivator." We spent the next hour crafting the perfect lie, an elaborate deception designed to ensnare them completely. Sharon typed up a letter on thick, cream-colored stationery, using the letterhead of a fictitious law firm in Austin, Texas. It was a masterpiece of legal jargon and false promises, meticulously designed to be utterly convincing. It spoke of a great uncle I never had, a long-lost relative named Ezekiel Finch. It spoke of mineral rights discovered on a barren, forgotten plot of land near Odessa, Texas, a desolate landscape suddenly blossoming with black gold. It spoke of oil. $2 million, Sharon said, holding up the printed letter, her voice a theatrical whisper. "That is the number. It's high enough to solve all their problems, to make them rich beyond their wildest dreams. But not so high that it sounds like a fairy tale. Too good to be true. It is the perfect bait. But there's a catch," I added, a grim satisfaction settling in my chest. "Right," Sharon said, typing again, adding the crucial clause. "The beneficiary must sign in person in Texas next Wednesday, November 16th, and he must be of sound mind and body at the time of signing. If he dies before signing, the entire estate, every cent, goes to charity. No exceptions." I took the letter. It felt heavy in my hand, not because of the paper, but because of the immense power it held, the potential to control my fate. This was my shield. This was the only thing standing between me and a violent death tonight. I left Samuel at the office with instructions to start the next phase of the plan, a complex web of legal maneuvering and covert surveillance. I drove home. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the lawn, making the house look dark and foreboding, a silent mausoleum. My truck tires crunched on the gravel driveway, loud in the evening silence, announcing my arrival. I walked up the steps. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cool, crisp air, trying to slow my racing heart. I had to sell this. If they sensed even a hint of deception, if they saw through my act, I was dead. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The atmosphere in the house was suffocating. It was thick with tension, palpable, a heavy cloak. Leo was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, which was turned off, his posture slumped, defeated. Brenda was in the kitchen, aggressively chopping vegetables, her movements jerky and angry, the rhythmic thud of the knife against the cutting board, a percussive accompaniment to her simmering rage. They looked like two people waiting for the executioner, or perhaps waiting to become executioners themselves. I walked into the living room, holding the letter. I let my hand tremble a little, a calculated tremor. I put on a look of utter bewilderment, of a man completely out of his depth. "Leo, Brenda," I called out, my voice shaking deliberately. "You need to see this. I don't, I don't understand what this means. Leo looked up, his eyes dull, clouded with despair. What is it, Dad? He sounded exhausted, like a man who had run out of options, completely drained of spirit. Brenda came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her expression tight with impatience. She looked at me with open hostility, her veneer of forced kindness gone. What now, Arthur? We're trying to get dinner ready. I sat down on the armchair, a familiar spot, and held the letter out to them, my hand still trembling slightly. This came in the mail today, I said, my voice carefully modulated. It was mixed in with the circulars. I almost threw it away. It's from a lawyer in Texas, it says. Well, you read it. My eyes aren't so good with the small print anymore. Brenda snatched the letter from my hand, her movements sharp, impatient. She read the first line, and her eyes narrowed, suspicion warring with curiosity. She read the second line, and her posture straightened, a subtle shift. By the time she reached the second paragraph, her mouth was slightly open, a silent gasp of disbelief, of dawning comprehension. What is it? Leo asked, standing up, sensing the dramatic shift in the room's energy, the sudden, charged atmosphere. Brenda didn't answer him immediately. She looked at me, her eyes wide, pupils dilated, a predatory glint entering their depths. She wasn't looking at an old man anymore. She was looking at a lottery ticket, a golden key to all her problems. Is this real? She whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile thread of hope. Arthur, did you know about a great-uncle Ezekiel? I shrugged, playing the fool, the confused old man. I think my father mentioned an Uncle Zeke once. He went west to work on the oil rigs in the 50s. We never heard from him again. I thought he died broke, just another forgotten family member. Why? What does it say? Brenda handed the letter to Leo, her hand shaking, the paper crinkling with the tremor. Read it, she said, her voice strained with excitement. Read the amount. Leo scanned the paper, his lips moving silently as he read, his eyes greedily devouring the words. Mineral rights, accumulated royalties, $2 million. He stopped. He looked up at me, then at Brenda, then back at the paper, his face a mixture of shock and burgeoning elation. $2 million? He choked out, the words a disbelieving gasp. Dad, this says you inherited $2 million. I gasped, putting a hand to my chest, a theatrical gesture. That can't be right. That's a mistake. $2 million? For me? It's not a mistake, Brenda said, her voice rising in a crescendo of excitement, her composure completely gone. Look at the seal. Look at the watermarks. This is official. $2 million. Leo, do you know what this means? Leo looked at her, and for a second, I saw the fear of the loan sharks, the crushing weight of his debts, completely leave his eyes, replaced by the blinding, intoxicating light of pure, unadulterated greed. It means we're rich, he whispered, a childish wonder in his voice. But wait, I said, pointing a shaky finger at the bottom of the page, my voice still infused with a touch of doubt of the bewildered old man. It says I have to go there, to Texas. Yes, Brenda said, reading over Leo's shoulder, her eyes devouring the words. You have to sign in person to claim the funds. Next Wednesday, the 16th. Next Wednesday. I sighed, rubbing my forehead, pretending to be overwhelmed. Oh, I don't know. That's a long trip. I'm not feeling well. Maybe I should just tell them to donate it. I don't need that kind of money. I have this house. I have you two. That's enough for me. The room went deadly silent. I watched them. I watched the panic flare, sharp and sudden, in Brenda's eyes. If I didn't sign, they got nothing. If I died before Wednesday, they got nothing. The insurance money was $500,000. This was 4 times that amount. The stakes had just been raised exponentially. No! Brenda shouted, almost lunging at me, her voice a desperate, animalistic cry. No, Arthur, you can't do that. Think of the family. Think of your grandchildren. You can't just throw away $2 million. Leo was nodding vigorously, sweat beading on his forehead, his face pale with alarm. She's right, Dad. You have to go. We'll take you. We'll drive you. It'll be a nice trip, a family road trip. I looked at them. I looked at the son who had stood in my garage with a gas can just 24 hours ago, contemplating my murder. I looked at the daughter-in-law who had poisoned my tea. I saw the gears turning in their heads, furiously calculating, weighing their options. They were doing the math. If they killed me tonight, they got enough to pay the debts and buy a small condo. If they kept me alive until Wednesday, they got millions. They could pay the Russians double to buy more time. They could pay off the title loan. They could have it all. But the loan sharks, I said innocently, a touch of false concern in my voice. I heard you talking on the phone, Leo. Something about Friday. Do we have money for that? I don't want you getting hurt. Leo flinched, his eyes darting to Brenda. She stepped in, smooth as a viper, her mask of sweetness firmly back in place. Don't worry about that, Dad, she said, her voice dripping with sudden, cloying sweetness. It was just a small bill. We can handle it. If we show the bank this letter, they'll give us an extension. They'll wait if they know millions are coming. It's all taken care of. Are you sure? I asked, feigning deep uncertainty. I don't want to be a burden, not with all this unexpected money. You are not a burden, Dad, Leo said, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace, a rictus of greed and relief. You are family. We are going to get through this. We are going to Texas. Brenda walked over to me. She knelt down by my chair, her movements soft, solicitous. She took my hand, the hand she had planned to leave cold and lifeless in a burning bed. We are going to take such good care of you, Arthur, she said, her voice a purr. You just need to rest. You need to stay healthy until Wednesday. We can't have anything happening to you before then, can we? I looked into her eyes. They were shining. Not with love, not with relief, not with any genuine human emotion, but with the cold, hard glint of avarice, of utter, unbridled greed. She wasn't seeing me. She was seeing a signature on a check, a conduit to a fortune. She had forgotten her fear of the loan sharks. She had forgotten her plan to murder me. The greed had consumed her completely, just as Samuel had predicted, blinding her to everything else. Okay, I said, patting her hand, a small, dismissive gesture. Okay, if you say so. I guess we are going to Texas. Brenda stood up, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. I'm going to make a special dinner, she announced, her voice ringing with false cheer. Steak and wine. We have to celebrate. I watched her walk into the kitchen, already humming a happy, tuneless melody. I watched Leo pull out his phone, probably to call the loan sharks, and beg for a few more days, promising them a fortune that didn't exist. I sat back in the armchair and closed my eyes. It worked. They had taken the bait, swallowed it whole. I had bought myself a week to sell the house from under them, a week to gather the final pieces of evidence, a week to prepare the final, devastating blow. They thought they had won the lottery. That fortune had smiled upon them. They didn't know they had just signed their own death warrant. The trap was set, and the jaws were about to snap shut. The next 5 days were a special kind of torture, a perverse inversion of reality. Dante, in his Inferno, must have forgotten to include this particular circle of hell. It was the circle where your executioners dress up as your loving caretakers, killing you with kindness while waiting for the check to clear. The house, which had smelled of gasoline and fear just 24 hours ago, now reeked of pot roast and fresh baking bread, a nauseating aroma of domesticity and deceit. Brenda had transformed into a domestic goddess, a vision of nurturing solicitude. She hummed while she cleaned, her movements brisk and cheerful. She fluffed my pillows, meticulously straightened my blankets. She brought me magazines, asked if the light was too bright, if the room was too cold. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award, a master class in theatrical deception. If I didn't know better, if I hadn't witnessed their true intentions through the lens of a hidden camera, I would have believed them. I would have believed that the terrifying threat of the loan sharks had scared them straight, that the promise of the $2 million inheritance had reminded them, belatedly, of the value of family. But I knew better. I had seen the gas can. I had heard their chilling words. I had seen the cold, calculating look in their eyes when they thought I was asleep. Breakfast became a ritual of nausea, every bite a forced swallow of their hypocrisy. On Friday morning, My supposed deadline with the loan sharks. Brenda served me pancakes with fresh blueberries and maple syrup, a picture of wholesome goodness. The blueberries were plump and sweet, bursting in my mouth, yet they tasted like ash. She sat across from me, watching me chew with a wide, maternal smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Eat up, Arthur," she said, pouring me more orange juice. "You need your strength for the trip to Texas. We want you healthy, strong, well-rested." I forced the food down my throat. It felt like swallowing stones, each mouthful a bitter reminder of their betrayal. I looked at her hands, the same hands that had slapped Leo for hesitating to kill me, the same hands that were now cutting my pancakes into bite-sized pieces, like I was a toddler, an invalid. Leo was even worse, a caricature of filial devotion. He had taken to hovering around me like a nervous nurse, his concern cloying and performative. He insisted on helping me up the stairs. Even though I could walk fine, my old legs still sturdy from years of physical labor. He brought me blankets when I wasn't cold, offered to fetch me water when I wasn't thirsty. On Saturday evening, he came into the living room where I was pretending to watch television, my eyes glazed over, staring at a static screen. "Dad, your ankles look swollen," he said, his voice thick with fake concern, his hands already reaching for my feet. "Let me rub them for you. It helps with the circulation, gets the blood flowing." I wanted to kick him. I wanted to scream that I didn't want his traitorous hands touching me, defiling me with their false tenderness. But I nodded, a small, weary assent. I let him lift my feet onto the ottoman. I let him massage my ankles, his touch a sickening parody of affection. I closed my eyes and imagined I was somewhere else, anywhere else. I remembered the times I had held him as a baby, rubbing his back to soothe his colic, his tiny hand gripping my finger. I remembered teaching him to tie his shoes, his small face contorted in concentration. Those memories, which used to bring me warmth and a surge of fatherly love, now felt like ice in my veins, chilling me to the bone. The son who was rubbing my feet was, I knew, calculating exactly how much those feet were worth, dead versus alive, a macabre ledger of profit and loss. I spent a lot of time thinking about Eleanor during those days, her memory a balm and a torment. I missed her with a physical ache, a hollow space in my chest. I missed her terrible cooking. Eleanor wasn't a chef. She burned the toast with consistent regularity. Her meatloaf was often dry, her coffee too strong. But every single meal she ever made me was served with love, with a genuine, unwavering affection. She would sit across from me, her eyes shining with warmth, and tell me about her day, about the mundane triumphs and frustrations. And her eyes would sparkle when I told her the food was delicious, even when we both knew it wasn't. Now, I was eating gourmet meals, prepared by a woman who wanted to dance on my grave, her every gesture a carefully constructed lie. The contrast was heartbreaking. It made me realize that luxury without love is just empty calories, a hollow imitation of true sustenance. I would have given every cent of that fictitious $2 million for one more plate of Eleanor's burnt toast, for one more genuine, loving glance. On Sunday afternoon, the plumbing in the kitchen sink suddenly developed a leak, a rhythmic dripping that drove Brenda crazy with its relentless sound. I watched her trying to fix it, banging a wrench against the pipes with frustrated curses, her carefully constructed facade momentarily cracking. "I'll call a plumber," I said from my chair in the living room, my voice calm, helpful. "I know a guy. He's cheap and he works Sundays." Brenda didn't argue. She just wanted it fixed, the incessant drip silencing the growing tension in the house. An hour later, a battered blue van pulled into the driveway, its side emblazoned with Ace Plumbing in peeling white letters. A man stepped out, wearing blue coveralls, with a tool belt slung low on his hips, a cap pulled down low over his eyes, and thick, horn-rimmed glasses. He carried a heavy metal toolbox, its contents clanking softly. It was Samuel. He looked completely different. He had shaved his scruffy beard, leaving only a neat, graying mustache, which gave him an air of quiet professionalism. He stood straight. He walked with purpose, no longer the shambling figure I knew from the bench. If I hadn't hired him myself, if I hadn't been privy to his transformation, I never would have recognized the homeless man from the library bench. He knocked on the door, a firm, workmanlike rap, and I let him in. "Sink is in the kitchen," I said loudly for Brenda's benefit, playing my part. Samuel nodded, touching the brim of his cap. "Yes, sir. I'll have it fixed in a jiffy. Just a loose washer, probably." Brenda hovered for a few minutes, watching him work, scrutinizing his every move. Samuel was a master of his craft, even in this new guise. He banged the pipes. He grunted with effort. He asked for a bucket. He played the part so well, so convincingly, that Brenda eventually got bored and went back to looking at expensive handbags on her tablet in the living room, her attention captured by material desires. As soon as she was gone, Samuel looked at me. He didn't speak, a silent, knowing communication passing between us. He reached into his toolbox and pulled out a small black device, no bigger than a matchbox, its sleek surface glinting in the dim kitchen light. He pointed to the underside of the kitchen island, the central hub of the house, where every conversation, every desperate plan had been hatched. I nodded. A subtle, almost imperceptible gesture. He stuck the device, a tiny listening bug, under the granite counter with a strong adhesive. Then he pulled out another one. He pointed upstairs, a question in his eyes. "I can't go up there," I whispered, the fear of being discovered still a raw nerve. "They'll see me. They're watching me like hawks." Samuel winked, a brief, conspiratorial flash of his blue eyes. "Leave it to me, Arthur." He came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a rag, his movements efficient. "Ma'am," he called out to Brenda, his voice sounding genuinely professional. "I just need to check the pressure in the upstairs bathroom. It's all connected to the main line, just to be sure the leak won't travel." Brenda sighed, a sound of irritation, without looking up from her tablet. "Go ahead. First door on the left. Just don't make a mess." Samuel went upstairs. I heard his heavy boots on the floorboards, the muffled sounds of a plumber at work. He was up there for about 5 minutes. When he came down, he handed me an invoice, neatly folded. "All fixed, mister." "Caldwell," he said, using my old name, a subtle nod to our past. "Just a loose washer. I tightened everything up. Here's the bill. Check the warranty information on the back. It's important." I took the paper. On the back, taped flat against the paper, barely visible, was a tiny wireless earbud, smaller than my thumbnail. I paid him in cash from the money I had withdrawn, a generous sum. He tipped his cap again, a respectful gesture, and walked out, his mission accomplished. As he drove away in his battered blue van, I felt a surge of adrenaline, a profound sense of empowerment. The trap was armed. The wires were laid. That night, after a dinner of roast chicken that tasted like sawdust, so consumed was I by the deceit, I excused myself to the attic. I claimed I had a headache, my usual excuse, now amplified by the emotional toll of the day. Brenda was all sympathy, offering me aspirin and a glass of water, her false concern a nauseating performance. I took them, the pills a bitter reminder of her previous attempt, and dumped them in the plant pot in my room as soon as I closed the door, sealing myself in. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. I put the tiny earbud into my ear. It connected automatically to the bugs Samuel had planted, a silent, technological tether to their machinations. The sound quality was crystal clear, chillingly so. It was like I was sitting in the room with them, a silent, invisible ghost at their table. At first, there was just the muffled sound of the TV, then the clink of wine glasses. They were drinking my expensive wine, the bottles I had been saving for a special occasion, for a moment of genuine celebration with Eleanor. "Can you believe the old goat ate 3 pancakes?" Leo's voice came through the earpiece, crude and mocking. He was laughing, a cruel, high-pitched sound, completely devoid of warmth. "He eats like a pig. Let him eat," Brenda replied, her voice sharp, dismissive. "Fatten the calf before the slaughter. We need him strong enough to sign those papers on Wednesday. After that, who cares?" There was a pause. I heard the distinct sound of wine being poured, more of my precious vintage being consumed by those who sought to consume me. "So, what's the plan for Thursday?" Leo asked, his voice a little more subdued, tinged with a nervous edge. "After we get back from Texas, we deposit the check. It'll take a few days to clear." Brenda sighed, the sound sharp in my ear, a clear indication of her impatience. We can't keep him here, Leo. I'm done playing nursemaid. As soon as the money is in our account, we dump him, discreetly. Dump him where? Leo asked, a hint of unease in his voice. There's a place over in the next county, Brenda said, her voice chillingly practical. Shady Pines. It's a state-run facility. It smells like urine and boiled cabbage, but they take anyone. We drop him off. We sign the admission papers, and we forget he exists. We tell everyone his dementia got worse, that he became too aggressive, and we couldn't handle him at home. It's perfect. Leo hesitated, a flicker of his earlier doubt. Isn't that a bit harsh, Brenda? I mean, he is giving us $2 million. He isn't giving us anything, she snapped, her voice rising in cold fury. We are taking it. It's our inheritance, Leo. We're just getting it early. And honestly, Shady Pines is the nice option. What's the other option? Leo asked, his voice dropping to a whisper, filled with a sickening curiosity. Brenda's voice turned ice cold, utterly devoid of humanity, a chillingly pragmatic calculation. The other option is that the excitement of the trip is too much for his heart. We still have those pills, Leo. Maybe on Thursday night, after we are rich, he gets confused. Maybe he accidentally takes too many of his heart medications. Or maybe he accidentally drinks a cup of tea with a little something extra in it. Old men die in their sleep all the time. It would be a mercy. Then we don't have to pay for the nursing home, or his monthly fees. Clean and simple. I sat in the dark attic, my hand gripping the iron frame of the bed so hard the cold metal bit into my palm, leaving red indentations. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't afraid. I was frozen, encased in a block of pure, absolute, unadulterated hatred. They weren't just greedy. They were evil. They were discussing my murder, my forced institutionalization, my slow, ignoble end, while drinking my wine in the house I built with my own hands. They had moved past desperation into the realm of sociopathy, justifying it all in their twisted minds. I was just an obstacle, a thing to be used and discarded, a disposable commodity in their ruthless pursuit of wealth, Shady Pines, or a lethal dose. Those were my options, my choice of demise. I took the earbud out of my ear. I couldn't listen to any more. I had heard enough. I had the recording. Samuel was recording everything on his end, too, an independent, corroborating witness. We had them. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the street lamp casting a yellow pool of light on the pavement. My truck was parked down there, a silent sentinel, my escape pod. I reached for my phone. I dialed Samuel's number. He answered on the first ring, his voice low, urgent. I heard them, I said, my voice steady, flat, devoid of emotion, a chilling calm. I know, Samuel said, his voice grim. I'm listening too. They are monsters, Arthur. Yes, I said, my gaze fixed on the floorboards that separated me from the people plotting my death. They are. So what do we do? Do we call the cops now? Do we shut it down? No, I said, my voice firm, resolute. Not yet. We stick to the plan, but we accelerate the timeline. I looked around the attic room, at the few boxes of my possessions that Brenda hadn't bothered to throw away, at the small, framed picture of Eleanor on the nightstand, her gentle smile a beacon in the darkness. Samuel, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. Execute phase 2, now. There was a pause on the line. Then I could hear the faint, knowing smile in Samuel's voice. You want to sell the house. I want it gone, I said, a fierce, burning desire for retribution consuming me. I want it sold by tomorrow. I don't care about the price. I want a cash buyer. I want the paperwork ready. When we come back from Texas, I want this house to belong to someone else. I want them to come home to a lock they can't open, to a deed that bears a different name. Consider it done, Samuel said, his voice sharp with renewed purpose. I have the investor lined up. Sharon has the papers drafted. We just need your signature. I will come to her office tomorrow morning, I said, my resolve unshakable. I will tell them I am going for a final checkup before the trip, a last-minute medical clearance. Arthur, Samuel said, his voice softening, a hint of concern in his tone. Are you sure? That is your home. You built it. It holds so many memories. It isn't a home anymore, I said, looking at the floorboards that separated me from the people plotting my death, from the rot and betrayal. It is just a house, and it is filled with rot. It is time to tear it down, Samuel. All of it. I hung up the phone. I lay back down on the bed, but I didn't sleep. I listened to the murmurs of their voices downstairs, the clinking of glasses, the cruel, mocking laughter of my executioners. Enjoy the wine, I thought. Enjoy the dream of millions. Because when you wake up, the nightmare begins, and I am going to be the monster under your bed. Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron, a fitting backdrop for the day's grim proceedings. Today, I was going to sever the last physical tie to my past, to the life that had been so cruelly betrayed. I came downstairs wearing my best Sunday suit, a dark blue wool that Eleanor had picked out for me years ago. Leo was in the kitchen, drinking coffee, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. He looked up when I entered, his eyes still heavy with sleep, but alight with a new, avaricious hope. "You look sharp, Dad," he said, his voice tight, forced. "Doctor's appointment?" I reminded him, keeping my tone casual, matter of fact. "Dr. Evans wants to make sure my heart is strong enough for the flight to Texas. Don't want any surprises before the big day." Leo nodded vigorously, almost frantically. "Good. That's good. We need you strong, Dad. Do you want me to drive you?" "No," I said quickly, perhaps a little too quickly. "You stay here. Help Brenda pack. We need to be ready for Texas. I'll take the truck. It will only take an hour or so." I walked out the door without looking back. I didn't want to see the house. I didn't want to see the porch swing where I used to sit with Eleanor, sipping lemonade on long summer evenings. I didn't want to see the vibrant flower beds she had planted, her green thumb bringing beauty to the world. In my mind, that house was already gone, burned to ash by the betrayal of the people inside it, a ruin of my former life. I drove straight to Sharon Hayes' office. The city was waking up, traffic humming with the mundane business of living. People were going to work, buying coffee, complaining about the weather, completely oblivious. They had no idea that in a high-rise conference room, an old man was about to detonate a nuclear bomb in his own life. A carefully orchestrated act of self-destruction that would, paradoxically, lead to his liberation. Sharon was waiting for me, her expression grim but resolute. Samuel was there too, looking somber in his thrift store suit, a silent, supportive presence. And there was a third man. He was young, sharply suited, and typed furiously on a laptop, his fingers flying across the keys. Sharon introduced him as Michael Thorne, a representative from the Meridian Property Group. He was a friend of hers, a man who bought distressed properties for cash, quickly and discreetly. "We're ready when you are, Arthur," Sharon said, pushing a stack of crisp, official-looking documents toward me across the polished table. I looked at the papers. The top one read, "Warranty Deed." It was the document that would irrevocably transfer ownership of 17 Briarwood Lane from Arthur Finch to the Meridian Property Group. Michael stopped typing and looked at me, his gaze professional, yet empathetic. "Mr. Finch, I want to be clear. We are offering $600,000. That is approximately 20% below market value, given the urgency. But we can close today. The wire transfer is ready. We take the property as is. We handle the eviction of any current occupants." $600,000. It was a substantial amount of money, more than enough to ensure my future security. But for a house I had built with my own hands, a lifetime of memories embedded in its very foundations, it felt like a steal, a violent amputation. But this wasn't a sale, not in the traditional sense. It was an amputation. I was cutting off a gangrenous limb to save the body, to save my soul. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the signature line, a moment of profound hesitation. For a second, a flood of memories washed over me. I thought about the height marks, penciled on the doorframe of the pantry, marking Leo's growth from a chubby toddler to a lanky teenager. I thought about the loose floorboard in the hallway that squeaked whenever you stepped on it, a sound that used to annoy me but now felt like the heartbeat of the house, a faint echo of Eleanor's presence. "Arthur," Samuel said softly, his voice gentle, understanding, a quiet anchor in the storm of my emotions. It's just wood and brick. The home is gone. It died with Eleanor. He was right. The home, the true essence of it, died with Eleanor. What was left was just a structure, housing two parasites, two greedy, ungrateful children. I signed. Arthur Finch. The ink flowed smooth and black, a final, definitive stroke. I signed the transfer. I signed the bill of sale. I signed the affidavit stating I was the sole owner and had the legal right to sell. With that single signature, I made my son and his wife trespassers. They were squatting in a stranger's house, living a lie, and they didn't even know it. Done, Michael said, closing his laptop with a quiet click. He tapped his phone. The transfer is initiated. You should see the funds in your account within the hour. Meridian Property Group now owns 17 Briarwood Lane. Now for the next step, Sharon said, sliding another folder across the table, its contents equally momentous. The trust. This was the safety net. We were taking the $600,000 from the house sale, plus the $50,000 I had kept in an emergency account, plus my entire life savings, and moving it all into an irrevocable trust, the Arthur Finch Freedom Trust. Sharon explained the terms as I signed, each word carefully chosen to protect me, to secure my future. You are the sole beneficiary during your lifetime, she said, her voice clear and precise. Upon your death, the remaining assets will go to a list of charities you have chosen. A local dog shelter, a food bank, the public library, the local hospice. And Leo? I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. Sharon pointed to a specific clause, prominently displayed. Leo Finch and Brenda Finch are expressly disinherited. They receive nothing, not a cent, not a stick of furniture, not a keepsake. And because it is an irrevocable trust, it bypasses probate. They can't contest it. They can't sue. It is bulletproof, Arthur, completely unassailable. I signed the last page. It was done. I was liquid. I was protected. And I was, in a strange, exhilarating way, homeless, free of all attachment. Technically, you have 30 days to vacate, Sharon said, a wry smile touching her lips. But Michael has agreed to execute the writ of possession immediately upon your signal. The moment you give the word, the sheriff shows up to clear the property. Tomorrow, I said, my voice hard, unwavering. Tomorrow is my birthday. We will do it then. A birthday present to myself. I stood up. I felt lighter. The crushing weight of the house, of the insidious betrayal, was gone. The fear of the loan sharks, of Leo and Brenda's desperate schemes, was gone. I had checkmated them, utterly, and they were still playing checkers, oblivious to the impending defeat. I drove back to Briarwood Lane. I stopped at a gas station and bought a lottery ticket. Not because I wanted to win, but because I needed a prop, a final flourish to my performance. I put it carefully into my pocket. When I walked into the house, Brenda was in the living room, surrounded by suitcases, a mountain of luggage. She was packing as if we were going on a grand European tour, not a coerced trip to Texas. "How is the doctor?" she asked, not looking up from folding a silk blouse. "Fit as a fiddle," I said, a cheerful lie. "He said I have the heart of a 20-year-old, strong as an ox." "Good," she said, a hint of genuine relief in her voice, for entirely selfish reasons. "We don't want you dying on the plane. Now do we?" I walked into the kitchen. Leo was there, slumped at the table, staring at his phone, his face pale and drawn. He looked sick, genuinely unwell. "Everything okay, son?" I asked, feigning concern. He jumped, startled. Yeah, Dad. Just checking the weather in Austin. Looks hot this week." I poured myself a glass of water. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Tomorrow's date was circled in red, a hastily scrawled note beside it. "Happy birthday, Dad," in Brenda's ornate handwriting. It looked less like a celebration, and more like a threat. "We're going to have a little party tomorrow," Brenda called out from the living room, her voice bright, saccharine. "Just us. And I invited that lawyer friend of yours, Sharon. Since she's a notary, I thought she could witness the paperwork for the Texas trip, just to be safe. Expedite things." I smiled into my glass, a cold, grim smile. She was bringing the witness to her own execution. It was perfect. "That sounds lovely, Brenda," I called back, my voice brimming with false anticipation. "A birthday party. I can't wait." I spent the afternoon in the attic, packing my own bag. But I didn't pack clothes for Texas. I packed the things I couldn't bear to lose, the irreplaceable relics of my past. Eleanor's photo album, my grandfather's worn pocket watch, the medal I won in the Army decades ago. I put them carefully in a small duffel bag and hid it under the bed, ready for my swift departure. Night fell. The house grew quiet, a deceptive calm. I lay in the dark, listening to the wind rattle the loose shingle I had been meaning to fix for months. I wouldn't have to fix it now. That was Michael's problem. I checked my bank account on my phone, watching the numbers spin. The balance was staggering. $650,000, plus my existing savings. I was a wealthy man, financially secure for the rest of my days. But lying there in the attic of a house I no longer owned, waiting for my son to try and trick me out of a fortune that didn't exist, I felt like the poorest man on earth, stripped bare of all illusions. But I wasn't sad. Not anymore. I was focused. I was a coiled spring, ready to release. Midnight passed. The date on my phone changed. November 15th, my 71st birthday. "Happy birthday, Arthur," I whispered to the darkness, my voice a quiet vow. Today was the day. Today, the lie would end. Today, the furnace of their greed would finally go cold. Today, I would look my son in the eye and show him that he hadn't raised a fool, that he hadn't raised a victim. I closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. I rehearsed my lines. I visualized the moment. I waited for the sun to rise on the ruins of my family, ready to set the final, inescapable trap. The birthday party was a masterclass in deception, a grotesque ballet of lies and false cheer. Brenda had transformed the dining room with balloons and streamers, a garish, almost comical mockery of celebration in a house filled with such profound hatred and betrayal. The table was set with the good china, the fragile porcelain Eleanor had cherished, and a large chocolate cake sat in the center, its frosting gleaming under the chandelier, a sugary facade over a bitter truth. Sharon Hayes arrived right on time, looking impeccably professional and utterly detached, her briefcase heavy with the real ammunition for the evening. Brenda greeted her with a smile that was all teeth, a tight, artificial rictus. "So glad you could make it, Miss Hayes," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "It means so much to Arthur to have his legal affairs in order before our big trip. He gets so easily confused." Sharon just nodded, her expression unreadable, her dark eyes missing nothing. "Happy to help," she said, simply, taking a seat at the far end of the table, an impartial observer to the unfolding drama. We sat down. Leo poured the wine, generously filling my glass to the brim, a gesture of extravagant hospitality. "Here's to 71 years, Dad," he said, raising his glass, his voice a little too loud, a little too jovial. "And to new beginnings." I looked at the dark red liquid. I knew Brenda's playbook now. I took a small sip, just enough to wet my lips, tasting nothing but the metallic tang of deceit, then set the glass down. I wasn't taking any chances. I let them drink. I watched as Leo gulped his wine down, his nerves clearly fraying, his facade cracking under the pressure. Brenda sipped hers slowly, gracefully, her eyes never leaving my face, like a hawk watching a field mouse, waiting for any sign of weakness. The dinner was elaborate, roast beef and potatoes, an expensive spread. But the conversation was stilted, artificial, a painful exercise in polite evasion. We talked about the weather. We talked about the flight to Texas. We talked about everything except the enormous, malevolent elephant in the room, which was the fact that two people at this table were planning to murder a third. Finally, the plates were cleared. Brenda brought out the cake, singing Happy Birthday in a voice that was slightly off-key, a discordant note in the symphony of lies. I blew out the candles, making a silent wish that this nightmare would finally end, that I would find my peace. "Now," Brenda said, clapping her hands together, her voice bright, almost manic. "Before we cut the cake, let's get the boring stuff out of the way. Since Sharon is here, we should sign the papers for the trip, just to make sure everything is in order, legally speaking." She reached under the table and pulled out a thick stack of documents, bound with a brass clasp. She placed them in front of me with a flourish, a theatrical presentation of my doom. "What is all this?" I asked, feigning surprise at the sheer volume of paper, my voice imbued with the weary confusion of an old man. "Oh, just standard stuff," Brenda said, waving her hand dismissively, impatiently. "Forms for the Texas lawyers, proof of identity, and a few things Leo and I put together to help you. Since you're coming into all this money, we thought it would be best if you had some help managing it, so you don't have to worry about the details." She flipped to the first page. It was a dense legal document, crammed with fine print. "This one just says, 'We're authorized to speak to the Texas lawyers on your behalf,'" she explained, pointing to a signature line with a manicured finger. "Sign here." I put on my reading glasses, the cheap ones I kept for close work. I leaned in close, squinting, my face a mask of concentration. I pretended to read slowly, moving my finger along the lines, carefully, painstakingly. In reality, I was scanning for keywords, for the familiar legal terminology that would betray their true intent. I saw them immediately. Power of attorney, durable, irrevocable trust. This wasn't just permission to talk. This was a full, unassailable transfer of power. If I signed this, they could empty my bank accounts, sell my assets, make all legal and financial decisions for me without my consent. I would be utterly stripped of my autonomy. "And this one," Brenda said, flipping to the next page before I could finish the first, her impatience barely contained. "This is just for medical emergencies. In case something happens on the trip, we need to be able to talk to the doctors, make decisions." I looked at the document. It was a medical power of attorney, with a prominent "do not resuscitate" order attached. It gave them the power to pull the plug, to legally stop doctors from saving me. If I had a heart attack tonight, or if they induced one, they could legally ensure my death. "And this last one," she said, her voice tight with barely suppressed excitement, her hand trembling slightly as she presented the final document. "This transfers the deed of the house into a family trust. Just for tax purposes, Arthur. It protects the asset." The deed to the house. The house I had already sold yesterday. The house that no longer belonged to me, or to them. She was trying to steal something I didn't even own anymore. A final, greedy grab. I looked up at Sharon. She was watching me, her pen poised over her notepad, ready to witness the crime, to document their every transgression. "This seemed like a lot," I said, my voice trembling just the right amount, a touch of nervous uncertainty. "I don't know, Brenda. Maybe I should read them more carefully. All this legal language is so confusing." "Oh, Arthur, don't be silly." Brenda laughed, a harsh, brittle sound, completely devoid of humor. "Sharon is here. She looked them over, right? Sharon, it's all standard. We just want to protect you. We want to make sure the money stays in the family, where it belongs." She pushed the pen into my hand, her fingers cold, insistent. "Sign," she whispered, her mask of kindness slipping, revealing the raw, desperate avarice beneath. "Just sign and we can have cake. The celebration can begin." I looked at Leo. He was staring at the table, his face pale and sweaty, his eyes wide and terrified. He was twisting his napkin in his hands, tearing the paper to shreds, completely consumed by his fear, his complicity. "Leo," I said softly, my voice quiet, almost a plea. "Do you think I should sign this?" He looked up. His eyes met mine. For a second, a fleeting instant, I saw the conflict. I saw the fear of the loan sharks warring with the last shred of decency, of filial loyalty he had left. Brenda kicked him hard under the table. I saw him wince, a sharp intake of breath. "Yes, Dad," he said, his voice hollow, defeated, utterly broken. "You should sign. It is for the best." I looked back at the papers. The trap was sprung. They had committed. They had put the documents in front of me. They had lied about their contents. They had coerced me, their father, in front of a witness, a trained legal professional. It was all happening. I gripped the pen. I lowered the tip to the paper. I let my hand shake violently, making the pen scratch against the surface of the document, a sound of desperate, faltering control. I don't feel well," I stammered, my voice breaking. The wine, it's making me dizzy. My chest. Sign it, Brenda hissed, leaning in close, her face contorted with rage, her mask completely gone, revealing the true monster beneath. Sign the damn paper, Arthur. Do it now. They're coming for us. I looked at her. I looked at the greed distorting her features, twisting them into something ugly and unrecognizable. I looked at the woman who wanted to kill me for a payout, for a fleeting escape from her self-made prison. And then, slowly, deliberately, I stopped shaking. I let the pen drop from my hand. It clattered onto the table, rolling across the fraudulent documents, a small sound that echoed like a gunshot in the sudden silence. No, I said. My voice was clear, strong, unwavering. It was the voice of the man who built this house, the craftsman, the patriarch, not the senile old man living in it. Brenda froze. Her eyes were wide, uncomprehending. What did you say? I said. No, I repeated, pushing the papers away from me, a gesture of profound rejection. I am not signing anything. Not the power of attorney, not the medical directive, and definitely not the transfer of a house that isn't mine to give. The room went dead silent. The air pressure seemed to drop, thick with unspoken threats, with dawning horror. Brenda stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, gasping for air, for understanding. What do you mean? She whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with a chilling disbelief. What do you mean the house isn't yours? I stood up. I pulled the crumpled bank statement from my pocket, the one I had found in the kitchen. I threw it on the table, a stark counterpoint to their fraudulent contracts. It landed with a soft thud, a damning indictment. I mean, I know about the loan sharks, I said, my voice cold, precise, utterly devoid of emotion. I know about the $212,000 debt. I know about the title loan against the house. And I know about the furnace. Every single detail. Brenda's face went utterly white, all color draining from it, leaving her looking like a ghost. Leo made a sound like a wounded animal, a choked sob. I leaned over the table, placing my hands flat on the polished wood, my gaze unyielding. I looked them both directly in the eye, my gaze burning into theirs. There is no Uncle Ezekiel, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. There is no oil in Texas. There is no $2 million. It was a lie. Just like your love for me was a lie. Just like this birthday dinner is a lie. A sick, twisted performance. Brenda stood up, her chair screeching against the floor, a piercing shriek of rage and utter defeat. You old bastard! She screamed, her voice hoarse, guttural. You tricked us! I tricked you? I asked, my voice rising, fueled by years of suppressed anger. You tried to burn me alive, Brenda. I watched you. I watched you in the garage, discussing my death. I heard you planning to send me to Shady Pines, to leave me in a urine-soaked bed. I heard you talking about pills and poison. You are the architect of this deception, not me. She looked at Sharon, then back at me, pure panic setting in, her eyes darting like a trapped bird. You can't prove anything, she spat, desperately clinging to her last shred of defiance. You're senile. Who is going to believe you? Sharon stood up, a quiet, formidable presence. Then she opened her briefcase. She didn't say a word. She just took out a laptop and set it on the table, its screen reflecting the harsh overhead light. She turned the screen toward them. She pressed play. The video from the garage filled the screen. The grainy, greenish night vision, Leo with the gas can. Brenda slapping him, her face contorted in anger. The audio was tiny, but every word was intelligible, chillingly clear. It's simple physics, Leo. One night of gas, and he just goes to sleep. Brenda stared at the screen, horror dawning on her face, a grotesque tableau of her own villainy. Leo put his head in his hands and started to sob, deep, racking cries of despair and self-pity. This is what we call evidence, Sharon said, her voice calm, professional, utterly unyielding, admissible in court, along with the audio recordings from the bugs in the kitchen and the living room. We have everything, Brenda. Every word, every threat, every plan. It's all here. Documented. Corroborated. Brenda looked around the room like a trapped rat looking for an exit, her eyes wide with a desperate, frantic energy. Her gaze landed on the papers on the table, the power of attorney, the medical directive, the deed transfer. If she could just get me to sign. She lunged. She didn't go for the door. She went for me. She grabbed the pen and tried to jam it into my hand, her strength surprising, born of pure, desperate rage. "Sign it!" she shrieked. Her face twisted into a mask of madness, her eyes wild. "Sign it, you old fool! We need that money! They are going to kill us! Sign it!" I grabbed her wrist. I didn't used to be weak. I had worked with steel and stone for 40 years, my hands hardened by honest labor, my grip still strong despite my age. I twisted her arm away, pushing her back, her flimsy strength no match for my righteous anger. "It is over, Brenda," I said, my voice steady, firm, imbued with the authority of my past. Then the front door opened. It wasn't the police. Not yet. It was Samuel. He walked in wearing his suit, looking every inch the distinguished gentleman, a quiet, powerful presence. He held a thick folder in his hand. He walked up to the table and placed the folder next to the laptop, his movements deliberate, unhurried. "Mr. Finch," he said, nodding to me, his blue eyes holding a profound understanding. "The sheriff is outside. He is waiting for your signal. The writ of possession is prepared." Leo looked up, his face wet with tears, snot running down his chin. "Dad, please! We were desperate! We didn't mean it!" "Didn't mean it?" I asked, looking at my son with a mixture of pity and profound disgust. "You walked into that basement with a can of gasoline, Leo. You were going to burn your mother's house down with me inside it. You meant every single bit of it. You just weren't strong enough to see it through." I looked at Brenda. She was rubbing her wrist, breathing hard, her eyes darting frantically between me, Sharon, and Samuel, calculating, evaluating her last options. "You have two choices," I said, my voice cold, unyielding. "You can walk out that door right now with the sheriff and face charges for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted arson, and elder abuse. Sharon says it's 20 years minimum, no parole." "Or?" Brenda asked, her voice trembling, a raw thread of fear finally breaking through her defiance. "Or," I continued, "you leave right now. You leave this state. You never contact me again. You figure out your own mess with the Russians, with Apex Financial. You disappear. And you never, ever come back." Brenda looked at Leo. Then she looked at the door, her eyes wide, calculating. She didn't hesitate. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She ran. She bolted for the door. A desperate, animalistic flight, leaving her husband sobbing uncontrollably at the table. She didn't care about him. She didn't care about the house. She just wanted to survive, to escape the consequences of her monstrous actions. I watched her go, and I felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, just a quiet, profound relief, like the silence that comes after a long, violent storm. Then there was Leo. He wasn't arrested, not yet. He was kneeling on the floor near the table, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs, a broken, pathetic figure. The police had focused on Brenda, the ringleader, the more aggressive of the two, but they were eyeing Leo suspiciously, their presence a silent judgment. I signaled the detective, a quiet gesture. "Give me a moment with him," I said. The officer nodded, a professional deference, and stepped back, giving us a small circle of privacy in the wrecked dining room. I looked down at my son. He looked small. He looked like the child who used to hide behind my leg when it thundered, his small hand clutching my trousers. But he wasn't a child. He was a man who had made a series of catastrophic, unforgivable choices. "Leo," I said. He looked up. His face was swollen and red, a map of misery, his eyes bloodshot and pleading. "Dad," he whispered, his voice broken. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to. She made me." "Please, Dad." "Stop," I said, my voice sharp, cutting through his self-serving narrative. "Stop blaming her. You picked up the gas can, Leo. You walked to the basement. You forged the signature on your mother's insurance. You were weak, and your weakness nearly killed me. You enabled her evil." He grabbed the hem of my jacket, his fingers cold and desperate. "Please, Dad, help me. The Russians, if I don't pay them. I pulled my jacket from his grip. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled loan shark notice. I dropped it on the floor in front of him, a stark reminder of his self-made hell. I am not going to press charges against you for the attempted murder, I said, my voice flat. Leo's head snapped up, hope flaring in his eyes, a desperate, fragile flicker. You? You aren't? No, I said, my gaze unwavering. Because at the very last second, when Brenda was screaming at you, you stopped. You stopped the pen from signing those papers. That tiny shred of humanity, that sliver of decency, is the only reason you aren't in handcuffs right now, next to your wife. Thank you, he sobbed, reaching for me again, a pathetic, desperate attempt at connection. Thank you, Dad. I knew you would save me. I stepped back, deliberately, creating a chasm between us. I am not saving you, Leo. I am just not sending you to prison for murder. But the fraud, the forgery on your mother's insurance, on my beneficiary form, that is a federal crime, Leo, and the police have the evidence. You will have to answer for that on your own. His face fell, the brief flicker of hope extinguished. But the money, my debts, the Russians. I leaned down, close to his face, my voice low, firm, definitive. I am not paying your debts, Leo. Not a cent. You dug this hole. You filled it with snakes. Now you have to live in it. You have to face the consequences of your choices. I stood up and looked around the room, the once vibrant dining room, now a scene of utter devastation. The house felt empty now, soulless, devoid of warmth or life. And one more thing, I said, turning to leave. This house, it belongs to the Meridian Property Group now. The new owners take possession at midnight. That gives you exactly 52 minutes to pack your clothes and get out. Get out? Leo stammered, looking around wildly, utterly stunned, utterly lost. But where will I go? I don't know, I said, turning toward the door, my final words cutting and precise. And frankly, Leo, I don't care. Maybe you can find a bench at the public library. I hear it's a good place to think, a good place to reflect on your life choices. I walked out of the house. I walked past the police cars, their blue and red strobes painting the night with chaotic light. I walked past the neighbors who had gathered on the sidewalk, whispering and pointing, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. I got into my truck and drove away. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. There was nothing behind me worth seeing. 1 month later, the Florida sun was shining so brightly it made the asphalt shimmer, a blinding promise of new beginnings. I stood in the parking lot of the RV dealership, running my hand along the cool, smooth side of the massive vehicle. It was a 40-foot Class A motorhome, a beast of chrome and comfort. It had a king-size bed, a full kitchen with granite countertops, and a satellite dish on the roof for endless entertainment. It was excessive. It was ridiculous. It was utterly, perfectly, magnificently mine. I climbed into the driver's seat. It smelled of new leather and freedom, a heady, intoxicating aroma. I checked the dashboard. Full tank of gas, GPS programmed, bank account secure. The irrevocable trust fund was set up, generating enough interest to keep me on the road for the rest of my life, a perpetual motion machine of independence. I drove the beast out of the lot, carefully merging onto the highway, a new horizon beckoning. I had one stop to make before I headed for that horizon. I pulled up to the curb in front of the public library back in Willow Creek, Pennsylvania, 2 days later. It was colder up here, the winter wind starting to bite, a stark contrast to the warmth I had just left. The bench was empty. I honked the horn, a loud, deep sound like a ship leaving the harbor, announcing its departure. A figure emerged from the coffee shop across the street. He was wearing a new coat, a thick wool pea coat that fit him perfectly, a quiet dignity in its cut. He carried a small duffel bag, his only possession. He walked with a slight limp, but his head was held high, his posture straight, purposeful. Samuel. I opened the passenger door. The pneumatic hiss was satisfying, a sound of anticipation. Samuel climbed up the steps, looking around the luxurious cabin of the RV with wide, appreciative eyes. "Nice rig, Arthur," he said, settling into the plush leather seat, a comfortable sigh escaping him. "A bit flashy for a contractor, isn't it?" I laughed, a genuine, full-throated laugh that reached my eyes. I earned it, Samuel. We both did. A reward for a job well done. He stowed his bag in a compartment and buckled his seatbelt, a gesture of quiet acceptance. He looked at me, his blue eyes twinkling, a spark of the old mischief returning. "So, where are we headed?" he asked, his voice filled with an adventurer's eagerness. I looked at the map on the screen. The whole country was spread out before us, a vast tapestry of possibilities. Mountains, deserts, oceans. No schedules, no deadlines, no people trying to kill us for insurance money. "I was thinking we go south," I said, a smile on my face. "Maybe the Keys, maybe Arizona. Somewhere the sun shines all day, somewhere far from here." Samuel nodded, leaning back and closing his eyes, a contented sigh escaping him. "South sounds good," he said. "My joints hate the winter, and I could definitely use a tan." I released the parking brake. The powerful engine rumbled a low, deep purr, eager to be unleashed. "Ready, partner?" I asked, looking at the man who had been a stranger, then a savior, and now a friend, a brother. Samuel opened one eye and grinned, a wide, genuine smile. "Drive, Arthur. Just drive." I pulled away from the curb. I watched the library disappear in the side mirror, fading into the distance. I watched the town of Willow Creek, a place that once held my entire world, shrink and vanish into the rear view. I thought about Leo, probably working off his debt in some kitchen, or perhaps sitting in a cell, facing the consequences of his fraud. I thought about Brenda, awaiting trial, her dreams of wealth shattered, her ambition her undoing. I thought about the house on Briarwood Lane, now just a line item in a trust portfolio, a property owned by a faceless corporation. They were ghosts, shadows of a life that no longer existed for me. I looked at the road ahead. It was wide and open, stretching endlessly into the horizon. I looked at the man sitting next to me, a stranger who had become a brother, a fellow survivor. For the first time in 71 years, I didn't know where I was going to sleep tonight. And for the first time in 71 years, I didn't care. I was free. I pressed the gas pedal, and we drove toward the sun, leaving the darkness behind us forever, ready to build a new life, brick by brick, mile by glorious mile. This journey taught me that blood does not define family. Loyalty and love do. I spent 40 years building a home for people who saw me as nothing more than a paycheck, a disposable asset. But a simple act of kindness toward a stranger on a bench saved my life. A bond forged not by blood, but by shared humanity. True wealth isn't the money in the bank. It is the integrity you keep when the world tries to break you. The courage you find to fight for your peace. Never apologize for protecting your peace. And never be afraid to burn down a toxic life to build a free one. You are stronger than you think. If this story resonated with you, if it struck a chord in your heart, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Have you ever had to cut ties with toxic family to save yourself? Let me know your story in the comments below. Your support helps me keep telling these stories. Stay strong and stay free.